Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening, Utakata-sensei, standing behind them, his hand raised. For the first time, Ren saw an actual change in their instructor's expression. The corner of Utakata's lips twitched slightly. That was when it hit them. He must have heard everything AJ said. In a flat but pointed voice, Utakata spoke. Good reaction, but when sensing danger, counter and create distance from the enemy. The entire class watched silently as Utakata lowered his hand and walked to the front of the room. Now stop making a ruckus and sit down. Ren shot AJ a look, to which AJ simply stuck out his tongue while rubbing his head. Ren sighed, then turned to glance at Hitoshi Aburame. The boy hadn't reacted at all. Still sitting there as still as before. Another sigh. Now at the front of the class, Utakata faced the students. My name is Utakata Ito, and I will be your instructor for your time in the academy. Most of you have already met me at the test, and those who haven't have seen me now. His voice remained calm and firm, carrying an undeniable authority. There is no need for introductions, I already know all of you. Instead, I will explain how your first year in the academy will go. His sharp gaze scanned the room. Any questions? A brief silence. No. The class responded in unison. Utakata-sensei wasted no time in making his expectations clear. You are the elite class of this batch, but that doesn't mean most of you are safe. If you rank last or if your performance is unsatisfactory, you will be forced down a class and shifted to class 1. The room immediately tensed as the students absorbed his words. Your curriculum is also larger and more demanding than the other classes, so be prepared. Utakata continued, outlining the subjects they would be studying. Theory subject included ninja history, understanding past wars, tactics, and shinobi legacies. Ethics, the morality of a shinobi, including mission conduct and loyalty to Hidden Leaf Village. Report writing and reading, writing and analyzing mission reports, a key skill for any shinobi. Mathematics and general knowledge, basic calculations, strategic planning, and survival skills. I will teach these subjects, but not for long. You are expected to learn them on your own. Chakra theory would be the only theoretical subject I would be personally teaching in detail. Practical training will include chakra circulation and control, starting with basic chakra circulation before moving to fine control techniques. Taijutsu, beginning with stretches and basic drills to condition the body for the academy taijutsu style. For those of you who want to schedule for physical training, meet me after class. Sparring was originally scheduled for second-year students, but this class would start in the first year after 1 week. Shuriken jutsu and basic weapon training would begin next week. Collect your study material after class is over. Any questions? As he finished, some students looked slightly overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information. The response was disorderly as some tried to ask questions at once. Utakata flared his chakra slightly. A sudden wave of controlled pressure filled the room, causing several students to flinch. Any questions? He repeated, his voice sharp. This time, the response was loud and clear. No, sensei. Ren grinned slightly, watching as some students straightened their backs instinctively. Yeah, this guy isn't messing around. As Utakata-sensei continued speaking, Ren's mind was already drifting elsewhere. As I guessed, the academy will be a waste of time, except for the sparring sessions, I suppose. Most of the theory lessons would be too basic for him, and while some of the practical training could be useful, he had already surpassed the fundamentals on his own. Maybe I should bring up the topic of the shadow clone jutsu at dinner today. He had been holding off on asking Juichi, but if he could get access to it early, his training speed would increase drastically. I hope he agrees. If I can get my hands on that jutsu, I'll be able to train far more efficiently. For now, though, he needed to find something useful to do while in the academy, something that wouldn't make him waste his time. Just as he finished thinking, the bell rang. Students immediately stirred in their seats, some perking up at the sound. But their excitement was short-lived. Utakata, ever calm and serious, simply continued speaking. Don't get excited. All your classes will be taken by me until the second year. If necessary, I will call in another instructor for later years. A few students visibly deflated upon hearing this. Ren, meanwhile, was more amused than anything. Guess there's no escaping him. Utakata pulled down a large chart of the elemental nations and turned back to the class. Alright. We'll begin with the history of the elemental nations today. Since you don't have your study materials yet, focus on the board. With that, he started the lesson. As the lesson dragged on, Ren shifted his attention to observing his classmates, using Observe Panel to gauge their levels. Most of them were the same students who had been allowed to skip the third test yesterday, except for 2 or 3 who must have been from the group that hadn't unlocked their chakra earlier or had taken the third test. The average level in the class was around 7, with no one below level 6. The highest level as expected was Itachi Uchiha, sitting calmly at the front. Level 28. That was a whole 12 levels above Ren. But Ren knew better than to take this at face value. Just like his own capabilities were higher than what his level suggested, Itachi's real abilities were likely much greater. He's at a solid Chunin level already. For a 6-year-old, that was nothing short of monstrous. Ren wasn't intimidated, but it was a good reality check. If I want to stay ahead in the long run, I can't afford to slack off. The class continued for another hour before the next bell rang. Utakata rolled up the map he had pulled down and, without warning, called out a name. Shionara. The room fell into silence. Utakata pulled a small stone from his pocket and, without hesitation, flicked it toward the last bench. The stone smacked into the head of a black-haired boy, who stirred awake lazily. With a tired sigh, the boy muttered, "Yes." Utakata didn't waste time. Names of the first 5 Kage. Without missing a beat, the boy answered, Hokage, Hashirama-sama. Rai Kage, A-sama. Sushi Kage, Ishikawa-sama. Mizu Kage, Byakuran-sama. Kazi Kage, Ritu-sama. Utakata nodded. Correct. Keep standing. Don't let me catch you next time. Utakata continued calling on students, mostly those who had been sleeping. One by one, students stood up, some answering correctly, others getting stones thrown at their foreheads. Ren's neighbor, Eiji, was also called out. Unlike the Nara, he failed to answer, rubbing his forehead in frustration after taking a stone to the head. Serves you right for calling me Speedo. Ren thought, amused. After cycling through enough victims, Utakata finally spoke. You are dismissed for today. Since this is your first day, you're free to go. From tomorrow, be present here at 9 sharp. Before anyone could react, Utakata flickered out of the room. Just as Ren was about to leave, he heard a familiar voice call out to him. Hey, Speedo. Wanna go eat something? Ren's eyebrow twitched. Turning to Eiji, he smirked. Sure, thief. Let's get some dango. Then, with a perfectly innocent smile, he added, the one who reaches last pays. Eiji froze for a second, his expression shifting as he realized he was slower. His eye twitched. TCH, frickin' Speedo. Without another word, he took off running at full speed. Ren chuckled to himself before following behind. Chapter 17, Bury them in earth. After the fight at the dango shop, Ren was calmly eating, savoring the sweet flavor, while Eiji sat across from him, still trying to control his breathing. Between huffs and puffs, Eiji pointed a shaky finger at Ren. You. How are you so fast? Ren didn't even pause between bites as he casually replied, I run around Hidden Leaf Village to build my stamina and speed. It was nothing special, at least in his eyes, and it wasn't something that needed to be kept secret. Eiji, however, looked genuinely surprised. Really? Maybe I should do that too. He muttered, thinking about it seriously. Ren raised an eyebrow, amused. Let's see how long that motivation lasts. As they ate, Ren casually asked, so, how do you find the academy? By now, Eiji had calmed down enough to eat properly, chewing on his skewer before answering. It's fine, I guess, but I don't really like sitting around and doing nothing. He leaned in slightly, a mischievous smirk on his face. So, I need to find a way to sneak around the class. Ren chuckled. Same here, but I don't think sneaking out will be easy, especially with Sensei around. Eiji sighed, leaning back in his chair. Yeah, I know, but I don't think he'd mind too much if you skipped sometimes. As long as your grades are fine. Ren nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. It's probably fine to skip after the first week. By then, we'll know our way around the academy. He wasn't against the idea, if anything, having someone else to coordinate with made it easier. Something about talking with Eiji made Ren feel strangely comfortable. It was rare for him to have such a casual conversation with someone his age. And he didn't mind it at all. As they were finishing, Eiji suddenly asked, can we have a spar? I've never really fought anyone and you easily blocked my punch, so I wanted to get some experience. Ren agreed since he too wanted to fight someone his age, so after finishing Ren led him to the training ground he found when he was exploring Hidden Leaf Village after hospital discharge. Once there they both did some stretches and started. AG instantly rushed after Ren with a punch since he knew it would be difficult to catch up to Ren's speed. Ren braced himself as AG's punch collided with his crossed arms. Even though he had blocked it cleanly, he still felt the force behind the strike. Not bad. His strength isn't that far behind mine. While Ren had the advantage in speed, AG wasn't weak. His raw power was enough to make blocking a bad long-term strategy. AG didn't stop. Seeing that his first attack was blocked, he quickly followed up, aiming a low kick to Ren's ribs. Ren twisted his body, dodging it smoothly, and retaliated with a quick jab toward AG's stomach. AG managed to step back in time, but Ren followed up immediately, closing the distance again. Realizing he was at a disadvantage, AG threw a wide hook, trying to push Ren back. But Ren ducked under it and swept his leg forward, aiming to trip him. AG saw it at the last second and jumped back, but he was off balance. Ren took advantage, launching forward with a shoulder tackle. The impact knocked AG backward, and he landed on the ground with a grunt. But instead of staying down, he rolled to the side and quickly pushed himself back up. A grin stretched across his face. Damn, you're quick. Ren smirked. And you hit harder than I expected. AG didn't waste time talking, he rushed forward again, aiming for another punch, but this time, his movements were more controlled. He's already adapting? Ren thought, impressed. Ren decided to change tactics. Rather than blocking, he chose to deflect. AG threw a straight punch, and instead of taking it head-on, Ren redirected the force with his forearm, causing AG to stumble slightly. Seizing the opportunity, Ren stepped forward, placing his leg behind AG's, and shoved him backward, making him lose balance again. This time, AG barely caught himself, but he was breathing heavier now. Ren could tell, his endurance was lower. Looks like he can't last much longer. AG panted but grinned. One more round? Ren nodded. Let's go. The spar continued. AG's stamina finally gave out after the third round, and he came to a stop, breathing heavily. Ren, also catching his breath, sat down beside him. You really need to work on your stamina, he commented, stretching his arms. AG sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. I know. I even did some running, but it still doesn't increase much. He took a few gulps from the water bottle he had carried with him. Ren, recalling his own discovery about stamina and vitality, offered some advice. You need proper nutrition too. Just running won't increase your stamina by itself. AG blinked, thinking it over. I see. Looks like I have to find a way to eat meat daily. He fell into deep thought, likely calculating how to afford more food. Ren left him to it and got up, moving on to his physical strength training. After recovering, AG also joined him, pushing himself further despite his earlier exhaustion. They trained together until evening, and before they left, Ren showed AG tree walking, since he had already mastered leaf balancing. AG tried it a few times, managing to stick to the trunk briefly before slipping off. This is harder than it looks, he muttered. Ren smirked. Just keep practicing. As the sun began to set, the two parted ways, heading home. Ren walked through Hidden Leaf Village's streets, satisfied with the day's progress. After arriving home, Ren prepared dinner for himself and Juichi, meat, vegetables, and rice. Not knowing how long his father would take, he sat down and started eating. But just as he took his first bite, the front door opened. Oh, you've cooked. I was hungry, thanks. Juichi walked in, casually sitting down to eat with him. As they ate, Ren decided to bring up the topic. Hey, Dad, can you teach me the shadow clone jutsu? Before he could say anything more, Juichi chuckled and casually tossed him a scroll. I thought you'd last at least 3 days, but you got bored on day 1. Ren blinked in surprise, then quickly unfurled the scroll. Sure enough, it was the shadow clone jutsu. His surprise turned to laughter, and he exclaimed, Thanks, Dad. Yeah, academy is pretty boring. Even in the elite class, there's not much exciting stuff in the first year. Juichi simply nodded, already expecting this. I knew it might be boring for you, but listen, be careful when using it. Ren immediately focused, knowing that his father wasn't joking. Your chakra is barely enough to sustain 1 clone. Don't try to push beyond that, or you might suffer mental strain. Also, avoid showing it off, keep it hidden as much as possible. Ren nodded, but Juichi wasn't done. If you leave a clone to train, do it at home, I'll show you the basement. If you use it at the academy, be extremely careful. If someone discovers you can use shadow clones already, you might be forced to graduate early, and I don't think you want that. Ren agreed without hesitation. You're right. I won't be graduating early, at least not before my second year. Juichi seemed satisfied with that answer, and they continued eating. After finishing dinner and cleaning up, Juichi led Ren to the living room. Standing before a seemingly ordinary wall, he spoke. Watch carefully. Remember the hand signs. Even with just one arm, Juichi quickly formed a sequence of hand seals before slapping his palm against the wall. A soft rumbling sound echoed through the house. Before Ren's eyes, a hidden staircase appeared, leading downward. Ren's eyes widened in surprise. Juichi chuckled. Didn't expect that, huh? Is this a personal training ground? Ren asked, still amazed. Juichi nodded. It's one of the benefits available to certain Jonin. Some are allowed to have a sealed room that can hide from Sensor Ninja. Only the Jonin who owns it and the Hokage have access to its key. Ren nodded slowly, still processing. Don't bring anyone here, Juichi cautioned again. As they walked down the stairs, Ren finally saw the hidden room. It was large, with fortified walls, a high ceiling, and minimal furniture, designed purely for training and secrecy. Juichi looked around. I don't use this much anymore. You can leave your clone here to practice ninjutsu, or anything else you want. Ren was shocked once again. I assumed it would just be a normal room. But this place is perfect for training. His father kept surprising him. For a moment, Ren even wondered, could Juichi have some deeper secrets? But he shook off the thought for now. Instead, he focused on exploring the room, already thinking about how he could best use it for training. As Ren explored the hidden training room, Juichi called him over and handed him a thin piece of paper. Ren immediately recognized it. You should also start learning some ninjutsu. You know what this is, right? Juichi asked. Ren nodded. Yeah, it's chakra litmus paper, used to test chakra affinity. Juichi smiled. Correct. He held the paper between his fingers and pushed a small amount of chakra into it. The paper split into 4. Wind affinity 1 part burned, fire affinity 1 part became damp, water affinity 1 part crumpled, lightning affinity 1 part turned to mud and fell apart, earth affinity it's not entirely accurate for high-level shinobi, since they tend to awaken multiple affinities over time, but it's still useful in the early stages. Juichi then handed Ren another paper. Alright, you try. Even though Ren already knew he had wind affinity, thanks to the system, he still went through with the test. Holding the chakra paper, he pushed a small amount of chakra into it. To his surprise, both halves of the paper turned to mud and crumbled away. Juichi nodded, not looking too surprised. Looks like you have an equal affinity for wind and earth. Ren raised an eyebrow. Both aren't that common in Hidden Leaf Village, right? Juichi shrugged. Not really, but it's not surprising in your case. My main affinity was earth, and your mother's secondary affinity was wind. Ren had expected to have only wind affinity, but this result meant that his body's natural affinity was actually earth. The wind affinity must have been gained through the system. So this is the original body's nature. I want to start with wind first, Ren decided. Juichi smiled approvingly. Good choice. Earth is useful for defense, but starting with an offensive affinity will be more beneficial, especially since wind pairs well with your speed. Juichi thought for a moment, then pulled a small leaf from his pocket. I'll show you leaf splitting. If you master it before learning wind-style jutsu, you'll have a much easier time later. Ren was slightly surprised. From what he remembered from the anime, leaf splitting was usually taught after someone learned basic wind jutsu, to help them fine-tune their control. But learning it this early would only be an advantage. Sounds good. I can even practice this in class, so I won't waste time. Juichi nodded. Exactly. He then demonstrated the technique, showing Ren how to focus chakra into the leaf, causing it to split cleanly down the middle. Ren watched closely, absorbing the process. After that, Juichi left the basement, leaving Ren to begin his new training. Chapter 18, Shadow Clone Jutsu equals death. Alone in the basement, Ren lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling as he revised his training schedule. Physical training in the morning can't be skipped. I should start running at my top speed instead of keeping a constant pace. That way, I can shorten my running time and add more strength training. He knew stamina training was important, but he had already built a solid base. Now, it was time to push for more speed and power. During academy hours, I'll practice leaf splitting. I'll keep the leaf under the table so no one will suspect anything. Then, after class, I'll do strength training again. Chakra control time can also be reduced since leaf splitting will help with that too. Yeah, this should work. At least until I start learning ninjutsu properly. With his plan finalized, he sat up, feeling satisfied. Time to put everything into action. Deciding to test his shadow clone jutsu, he headed upstairs to find his father. Juichi was sitting in the living room, looking over some documents when Ren approached him casually. Hey, Dad, I'm gonna try the shadow clone jutsu. You wanna watch? The paper in Juichi's hand slipped. His head snapped up. No. Ren flinched at the sudden shout. No, you brat. Haven't you read anything about chakra theory? You could die if you practice it now. Ren froze. What? I could die just from using the shadow clone jutsu? His voice rose in panic. Juichi sighed, rubbing his temple as if dealing with a particularly stubborn fool. You seriously haven't read about chakra theory yet, and you already want to start using a B-rank technique? I don't even know what to say to you right now. Ren gulped. Seeing that Ren genuinely had no idea, Juichi sighed again before explaining. Listen carefully. Your body has chakra pathways spread all over, connecting to tenketsu points, which release chakra. Hand signs help direct chakra through specific pathways, allowing you to use jutsu. Ren nodded, following so far. But the problem is that a child's chakra pathways are weaker compared to an adult's. That's why it's mandatory for young shinobi to start with low-rank jutsu. It helps your chakra pathways adjust and strengthen over time. Juichi leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. If you try using higher-rank jutsu too early, your chakra pathways might not be able to handle the strain and could burst. If that happens, you could suffer permanent damage, or in the worst case, die. Ren's face drained of color. Oh. It was a huge oversight on his part. He had gotten his student ID and course material today but hadn't actually checked the books on chakra theory yet. Juichi, seeing that Ren understood his mistake, sighed heavily. Then, without warning, he snatched the shadow clone scroll out of Ren's hands. Alright, no shadow clone jutsu until you can show me the 3 academy jutsu, 3 E-rank wind jutsu, 3 E-rank earth jutsu, and the D-rank body flicker. Ren looked down at the new scroll Juichi handed him. There was no arguing, he messed up, and this was his punishment. He muttered an apology, feeling a little embarrassed. Juichi sighed again. Be careful next time. If you pull another stunt like this, I won't be giving you any of the good stuff in the future. Ren immediately perked up. Good stuff? If he wanted access to better jutsu and techniques later, he couldn't afford to mess up again. Hastily, he promised, don't worry, it won't happen again. I'll learn all of these as fast as I can. Juichi ruffled Ren's hair before standing up. See that you do. With that, he left the room, leaving Ren standing there, still feeling the aftershock of what he had just learned. Back in his room, Ren sat down with the chakra theory book he had received from the academy. Given what had just happened, he wasn't taking any more chances. As he flipped through the pages, he quickly realized that Juichi was completely right. The book detailed how chakra pathways developed, how improper chakra control could cause internal damage, and why children were required to start with low-rank jutsu before advancing. There were also several other things that weren't mentioned in the anime. Some of the most notable details included how chakra exhaustion could lead to internal injuries if overused too frequently, the importance of hand seals in shaping chakra, how each seal activated specific chakra pathways in the body. A detailed explanation of nature transformations and how affinities influenced a shinobi's ability to learn certain jutsu. A section on Ganjutsu resistance, explaining how chakra flow could be used to break illusions. Ren read all of it in detail, making sure he understood everything. Despite the amount of information, his high intelligence stat allowed him to process and memorize the entire book. By the time he finished, over an hour had passed, and he received a system notification. Intelligence +1, his intelligence stat increased to 20. Just as Ren was about to drift into sleep, he remembered something. Wait. I silenced my system notifications this morning. I never checked what I got for entering the academy. Curious, he spoke aloud. Show me the rewards. The system responded instantly. Congratulations for entering the academy, you have received 4 gain in level chakra points, you have earned a chance to spin the wheel to get a minor talent. Ren's eyes lit up. Nice. I don't have a consistent way to earn points yet, so I have to rely on system rewards like this. These system points will be a huge help. What excited him even more was the spin the wheel reward. Last time I spun the wheel, I got improved chakra control. Let's see what I get this time. But before spinning, he distributed the chakra points first. System, add 2 points to chakra and 2 to vitality. Chakra 18, vitality 20. As soon as his vitality reached 20, another notification rang. Chakra 19, Ren blinked. Wait. What? My chakra increased again? It wasn't part of the system rewards, so how did it happen? He pondered for a moment, then suddenly came to a realization. Vitality represents my physical energy, and thanks to my rebirth, my mental energy was already high. Since chakra is a combination of physical and mental energy, my chakra must have increased because my physical energy finally caught up to my mental energy. As he finished that thought, another notification rang out. INT +2, INT, 22, congratulations. Your first attribute has reached Chunin level, reward, +1 Chunin level attribute point, Ren grinned. As expected. Once I pushed an attribute past 20, it officially entered Chunin level. He wasn't in a hurry to use the point, though. Instead, he saved it for the future, knowing that Chunin level points would be much harder to get. With that handled, he turned his attention back to the wheel. Ren took a deep breath, anticipation rising. Alright. Let's see what I get this time. He reached out and spun the wheel. The wheel began turning, colors and words flashing as it blurred in motion. Ren watched closely, waiting for his new minor talent. The wheel spun rapidly, flashes of different talents appearing as it whirled. Ren watched closely, his excitement building as the wheel gradually slowed down. Click. 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 Finally, the pointer landed on enhanced reflexes, minor talent. Your reaction speed is slightly above average. You can respond to sudden attacks, movements, and environmental changes faster than most people of your level. Ren's eyes lit up. Now this is something useful. Reflexes were one of the most important traits for a shinobi. A split-second reaction could be the difference between life and death in battle. It wasn't something as extreme as precognition, but it meant he could react to attacks faster, dodge more efficiently and counter opponents with better timing. For someone already focusing on speed-based combat, this was the perfect talent. With my agility and this boost, I'll have a much easier time avoiding hits and landing counters. Ren grinned as he analyzed his new talent. This is perfect for me. Now, my body and mind are in sync. With high intelligence, he could predict attacks and react faster mentally. But if his body couldn't keep up, it would be pointless. Feeling satisfied, he spoke aloud. System, show me my stats. A familiar blue panel appeared before him. Name, Ren Takahashi, level, 16, attribute, strength, 16, agility, 20, intelligence, 22, vitality, 20, chakra, 19, talents, improved chakra control, enhanced reflexes, mastery, chakra control, 52%, intermediate, fast fist taijutsu, 35%, basic. Ren's eyes sparkled as he stared at the slowly filling panel. Every stat, every talent, and every mastery represented growth. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The excitement still buzzed inside him, but sleep was catching up. Taking one last glance at his progress, he laid back on the bed. Tomorrow, I push even further. And with that thought, Ren drifted into sleep. Chapter 19, Becoming a Porcupine. Waking up early in the morning, Ren followed his usual routine, freshening up, heading out for morning training, then returning home for a bath and breakfast. After saying goodbye to his father, he made his way to the academy. It had been a week since the academy started and since the Shadow Clone Jutsu incident. Since then, Ren had been strictly following his training schedule. Aside from his usual morning exercises, he had also been visiting the library daily to study the E-rank jutsu his father had told him to learn. The first step? The 3 Academy Jutsu. Clone Jutsu, Transformation Jutsu, Substitution Jutsu. Since library scrolls couldn't be taken outside, Ren memorized the hand signs first, then returned home to practice. The Transformation Jutsu was the easiest, requiring only 3 signs, dog boar ram. Ren attempted it on the first try, poof. He successfully transformed into his father. System notification, congratulations. You have learned your first jutsu. Reward, +1 gain in level point. Without hesitation, Ren dumped the point into chakra, increasing it to 20. Seeing his chakra stat reach 20, he couldn't help but smirk. Almost at Chunin level for chakra. Soon, I'll be able to make a shadow clone safely. After successfully learning all 3 jutsu, Ren practiced them for an extra day, making sure he was comfortable using them in real situations. But he noticed something. None of them appeared on his mastery panel. So they don't have their own mastery level? Thinking about it, he realized the reason. They're supplementary jutsu, so they likely fall under chakra control mastery instead. Since chakra control determines how well someone can perform them, his 52% intermediate chakra control allowed him to learn them instantly. Once he fully mastered the jutsu, Ren started experimenting. Since his chakra control was high, he realized he could flow chakra faster than the normal hand seal sequence required. He tested skipping seals, carefully studying how chakra traveled through his pathways when using each jutsu. By adjusting his chakra flow, he managed to reduce the required hand seals from 3 to just 1. But then, he went even further. Since the last remaining hand sign was only needed to stabilize the flow, He pushed himself to try eliminating it entirely. It worked, but he noticed that the activation speed was slower than using even one seal. With the Academy 3 successfully learned, Ren moved on to elemental ninjutsu. Rather than learning all 3 Winjutsu at once, he decided to focus on them one by one. First Winjutsu, Wind Levitation Jutsu, E rank. Description: by controlling the wind, the user can force air beneath an object to make it levitate. Practical use: he combined this with his Shuriken Jutsu practice, using small wind adjustments to keep his projectiles airborne longer or redirect their movement slightly. Second Winjutsu, Wind Clone, E rank. Description: a non-tangible clone made of wind. Unlike its higher rank counterparts, attacks pass through it. Practical use: since it was just moving air, the clone was extremely fast and could close in on an enemy before blasting a harmless gust of wind. Effectiveness: the blast was too weak to do any real damage, more of a nuisance than an actual attack. Only little kids would be bothered by wind in their face. But that just means I need to get creative with it. Ren didn't disregard it. Instead, he decided to train it harder just because of how annoying it could be in battle. Third Winjutsu, Projectile Control, E rank. Description: by coating projectiles in a thin layer of wind, the user can slightly adjust their trajectory or give them an extra push to increase their speed. Practical use: once again, perfect for training alongside Shuriken Jutsu. With this, Ren was able to correct mid-flight errors and make Shuriken curve slightly, an incredibly useful technique for deceptive attacks. After learning the 3 Winjutsu, Ren immediately worked on reducing their hand seals. Wind Levitation, reduced from 4 2-hand signs. Projectile Control, reduced from 4 2-hand signs. Wind Clone, reduced from 4 3-hand signs. The Wind Levitation Jutsu and Projectile Control Jutsu were more useful than the Wind Clone, so he worked harder on the former than the latter, but that changed when he tried to use Winjutsu in one of his spar against Eiji. He used the Wind Clone first, sending it rushing toward him. Eiji, thinking it was a real attack, prepared to dodge, only for the clone to burst into harmless wind right in his face. The gust messed up his footing, making him stumble slightly. TCH, damn it, Ren. That's just annoying. Ren grinned. Good, then I'll keep using it. Even though the wind clone was weak, it was effective in messing with an opponent's focus. He made a mental note to continue training it, not because it was strong, but because it was hilarious to use. The academy continued to be as dull as ever, but Ren at least had something productive to do now. Rather than wasting time listening to lectures he already knew, he practiced the leaf-splitting technique under his desk, hidden from sight. After successfully performing the technique for the first time, a system notification had popped up: Wind Style Mastery -12%, Beginner. That was when Ren realized something: not every technique has its own mastery. Instead, they fall under parent categories like Wind Style or Chakra Control. This was useful information. If he wanted to increase his overall Wind Style mastery, he needed to train multiple Winjutsu, not just a single technique. A week had passed since the start of the academy, and today was the day Ren had been waiting for. Finally, sparring and Shuriken Jutsu training would begin. Ren was excited. If my guess is right, I might be paired against Hitachi. The thought thrilled him. Even though there was a high chance of losing, he wouldn't go down easily. Arriving at the academy, Ren took his usual seat beside Eiji and Hitoshi Aburame, the quiet bug boy. Hitoshi barely spoke, only answering when the teacher called on him. Ren wasn't sure if the boy was just naturally reserved, like most of his clanmates, or if he was simply too obedient. But one thing was clear. Every now and then, Ren would hear a faint buzzing sound from Hitoshi's direction. And every time he heard it, a chill ran down his spine. He knew what it was. Bugs. Lots and lots of bugs. Resisting the urge to shudder, Ren would subtly shift away, moving a bit closer to Eiji. Eiji noticed this behavior a few times and looked at him, confused. Yeah, no way I'm explaining this. The bell rang, signaling the second period, and Utakata-sensei closed his book. Today, we will have your first Shuriken Jutsu class. Form a line and head toward the training ground outside. Quietly. The students moved in silence, knowing how strict their teacher could be. Everyone still remembered the time Utakata made a student stand on his hands for an entire class because he had been caught sleeping and couldn't answer a question. No one wanted to experience that. Once outside, the students stood in 5 rows of 6 students each, a formation they had already been taught. Utakata stood in front and explained. Each row has a box full of shuriken in front of them. You are to throw 5 shuriken at the target in front of you. He pointed toward the target board set up ahead. After throwing, do not retrieve them until I give the clear. First years tend to have creative aims, and we do not want anyone becoming porcupines. A few students snickered but were instantly silenced by Utakata's sharp gaze. Any questions? No, sir. The response rang out in unison. Ren stood in the last row, 5th position, with Eiji in front of him and Hitoshi behind him. Since everyone had a clear view of each other's performance, all eyes were on Itachi when his turn came. He grabbed 5 shuriken and threw them all at once with perfect precision. All 5 hit bullseye. Almost every girl in the class cheered, only for Utakata's icy glare to silence them instantly. Retrieve. Itachi moved back in line without a word, his face as calm as ever. Soon, Ren's turn arrived. Eiji went first, throwing his shuriken one by one. 4 hit the bullseye and 1 was just slightly off. Then came Ren. He grabbed 2 shuriken in his left hand and 3 in his right. In a single motion, he threw them all together. All 5 hit the bullseye. Unlike with Itachi, there was no cheering or reaction. Everyone had learned their lesson, getting too excited only led to lost marks. Retrieve, Utakata ordered. Ren almost used wind levitation out of habit but stopped himself just in time. When he glanced at Utakata, he noticed the man's gaze was fixed on him. His face gave away nothing but he had definitely noticed something. Still, Ren stayed calm, retrieved the shuriken, and rejoined the line. Once everyone finished, Utakata addressed the class. All your classes, and your results, will be reflected in your final evaluation at the end of the year. His tone remained neutral, but the meaning behind his words was clear. A shinobi is evaluated continuously. They must always prove that they have value, something that makes them worth investing in. Ren's eyes narrowed slightly. Otherwise, you're on your own. Utakata hadn't said it outright, but Ren understood the message clearly. This was a military village, after all. There was no such thing as guaranteed success, only those who proved their worth would thrive. Which was why Ren would never shy away from showing his talent if it meant he could gain something. The bell rang, marking the end of class. Before dismissing them, Utakata left them with one last instruction. Gather here after break. Your first sparring session will begin next. Ren grinned slightly as he followed the rest of the students to lunch. Sparring, huh? Let's see if I get matched against Itachi. Chapter 20, Husband Stealer. After the lunch break, the students gathered back at the training ground. Utakata was already standing in place, his usual neutral expression unreadable. Once everyone had settled, he began speaking. I will be calling one pair at a time. When your name is called, step forward and perform the seal of confrontation before the fight begins. The students listened attentively. The winner is decided when either of the two gives up or when I deem the fight too dangerous to continue. Only taijutsu is allowed. No weapons, no ninjutsu. Once the fight is over, you are to perform the seal of reconciliation. If any of you happen to forget, I will personally make sure you learn how to do it properly. Ren noted the way Utakata's eyes lingered on some of the clan children, particularly the Uchiha and Yuzuka, and he could tell the warning was directed at certain students who might refuse to acknowledge defeat. Utakata glanced at his roster and called out the first pair. Eiji Nakamura and Izumi Uchiha. Eiji grinned, practically bouncing forward. On the other side, a young girl with long brown hair and a purple shirt bearing the Uchiha symbol stepped into the ring. Her eyes were calm, but her frequent glances at Itachi did not go unnoticed. Ren smirked. She's more focused on impressing him than winning the fight. Utakata spoke. Do the seal of confrontation. Both formed the half-tiger seal and clasped hands briefly. Begin. The moment Utakata stepped back, both fighters instinctively jumped backward, creating distance. Then, at the same time, they rushed toward each other. Izumi struck first, throwing a fast jab aimed at Eiji's chest, but Eiji ducked and countered with a punch to her ribs. Izumi blocked it with her forearm and retaliated instantly with a sweeping kick. Eiji leaped over it, flipping in midair, and tried to land a kick on her shoulder. Izumi raised her arms just in time to block, but she stumbled slightly from the impact before quickly regaining her footing. She then closed the distance and pressed forward with sharper, more aggressive attacks. A left hook came first, Eiji dodged. She feinted to the right before launching a spinning back kick, which landed solidly, sending Eiji sliding back. He caught himself before he could fall, his eyes narrowing in focus. Ren observed closely. Eiji isn't just fast, he's unpredictable. Izumi was stronger and more precise, but Eiji relied on footwork and erratic movements to make his attacks harder to read. When Izumi charged again, Eiji had already adapted. He ducked under her punch, rolled to the side, and spun behind her. Before she could react, he delivered a powerful kick to her back, making her stumble forward. Seeing the opportunity, Eiji feinted left and struck from the right, landing a clean punch to her stomach. Izumi gasped, stepping back to recover, but Eiji didn't let up. A second punch hit her ribs, followed by a third strike to her shoulder. Izumi grimaced, trying to counter, but her movements had slowed considerably. Utakata kept a close watch, ready to intervene if necessary. Eiji saw the opening and twisted his body, sweeping Izumi's legs out from under her. She fell backward, hitting the ground hard, and before Eiji could press further, Izumi exhaled sharply and raised her hand. I give up. Yukata stepped forward. Winner, Eiji Nakamura. Eiji grinned, offering Izumi a hand. She hesitated, but took it, letting him pull her up. Then, without the needing to be reminded, they both performed the seal of reconciliation. Yukata nodded in approval. Return to your positions. Eiji jogged back to his spot, a wide smile on his face. As he passed Ren, he whispered, "Told ya I'm fast." Ren smirked. "Not bad, thief. You might actually be worth training with." Eiji scoffed. "Might? I am worth training with." Their banter was interrupted when Yukata called out. Yukata's voice rang out across the training ground. "Ren Takahashi and Itachi Uchiha." Ren stepped forward, his expression calm and composed. He glanced at Itachi, expecting to meet his gaze, but instead saw him looking at Eiji. A thought crossed Ren's mind. Is he actually petty enough to rough him up later? But then, he shook his head. No, he's probably just feeling weird seeing Izumi upset but doesn't really understand what that feeling is. Itachi stepped into the ring with the same impassive look he always wore. The moment both boys faced each other, Yukata spoke again. Do the seal of confrontation. Ren and Itachi clasped hands, forming the half-tiger seal. Begin. The second Yukata stepped back, both fighters moved simultaneously. Itachi took the initiative, stepping forward with a sharp jab aimed at Ren's shoulder. Ren sidestepped smoothly and countered with a quick strike to Itachi's ribs. Itachi twisted just enough for the punch to graze him before retaliating with a palm strike toward Ren's chest. Ren met it with his own palm, both of them pushing against each other briefly before disengaging. Neither backed down. Ren launched a low kick at Itachi's shin, but Itachi raised his foot just in time to avoid it and spun into a high kick toward Ren's head. Ren leaned back, avoiding the blow by inches before closing the distance again. He feinted a right hook before shifting into a left elbow strike, but Itachi caught his arm mid-motion and attempted to sweep Ren's legs out from under him. Ren twisted midair, landing on his hands before flipping back onto his feet. The exchange continued at a rapid pace. Their movements were precise, measured, and calculated. Every attack was countered, every strike dodged, and every opening immediately closed off. For the first minute, they were completely even. Then Itachi took it up a notch. He stepped in closer, his movements suddenly becoming sharper and faster. His punches came in quick, controlled bursts, each one aimed at a vital point. Ren managed to dodge, but Itachi adjusted mid-attack, following up with a spinning kick toward Ren's ribs. Ren barely avoided it by twisting his body at an unnatural angle, his feet skimming the ground as he regained balance. Itachi's strikes were now unrelenting, pushing Ren further back. But despite the overwhelming pressure, Ren wasn't getting hit. Every time Itachi thought he had an opening, Ren moved in an unpredictable way. Instead of standard dodging patterns, he twisted his body at odd angles, ducked at strange timings, and maneuvered in ways that seemed almost random. It was frustratingly difficult to land a clean hit. Itachi's eyes narrowed slightly as he adjusted again, stepping up his speed even more. Ren could feel the shift. He's trying to overwhelm me with pure speed now. Itachi suddenly launched a high-speed punch straight for Ren's face. Ren made his move. Focusing a high amount of chakra into his legs, Ren planted himself firmly onto the ground. Just as Itachi's fist was about to hit him, Ren bent his entire upper body backward, arching his spine at a near impossible angle. Itachi's punch missed by mere inches, cutting through the air just above Ren's face. At the same moment, Ren spotted an opening. With his center of gravity lowered, he shifted his weight forward and thrust his fist toward the open space between Itachi's legs. It happened in an instant. Before either of them could react, a hand gripped both of their arms. Yukata had flickered into the ring. His grip was firm, holding both their attacks in place. His voice, calm as always, echoed through the field. Stop. The match is a tie. It was only then that Ren and Itachi realized what had just happened. Itachi's fist was inches away from Ren's face. And Ren's fist was inches away from Itachi's balls. A tense silence filled the training ground. Yukata released their arms, stepping back. Perform the seal of reconciliation. Ren straightened his posture, shaking off the adrenaline, and raised his hand. Itachi, unfazed as ever, did the same. Their fingers clasped together briefly before they both took a step back. Yukata nodded once. Return to your places. Ren walked back to his spot, his mind still replaying the last few moments. Eiji leaned over, whispering, I swear, if you had hit him there, the entire Uchiha clan would have been after you. Ren smirked. Yeah, but I bet the boys would have been thankful. Eiji snorted, trying to hold in his laughter. Meanwhile, Itachi had returned to his own spot, his face still unreadable. But for the first time since joining the academy, Ren swore he saw the corner of Itachi's lips twitch, just slightly. The fight had ended, but one thing was clear. This wouldn't be their last match. With 13 more rounds left, the excitement from Ren and Itachi's fight faded quickly as the class refocused on the remaining matches. However, that didn't stop a few girls from glaring at Ren like he had stolen their future husband. The fiercest of them was Izumi Uchiha, her expression dark as if she was 1 second away from declaring war. If Utakata weren't here, she might have jumped him on the spot. At the same time, Ren noticed something else. A few girls were staring at him with admiration instead of anger. It seemed that his performance had gained him some unexpected attention. Eiji, ever the opportunist, leaned in and whispered, "Looks like you have some fans now." Ren didn't respond. Instead, he made a mental decision. Eiji was getting off too easy in their spars. Next time, Ren would make sure he regretted talking. A sudden shiver ran down Eiji's spine, and he quickly shut his mouth. Among the next fights, the one that stood out most was between Takeda Uchiha and Hitoshi Aburame, the only 2 students besides Ren and Itachi who had level 10 or higher. Takeda started arrogantly, relying on power and speed, but Hitoshi was unshaken. His movements were minimal, his counters precise. In a matter of moments, he subdued Takeda completely, forcing him into a hold. The match ended quickly. Takeda's face was a mix of frustration and disbelief, a classic Uchiha reaction to losing unexpectedly. Ren wasn't surprised. The Aburame fought like strategists, always thinking several moves ahead. Takeda was strong, but not the strongest. Once all the fights were finished, Utakata had the students sit in a semicircle as he stood before them. His gaze swept over the class, and then he began his feedback. His comments were blunt, direct, and merciless. Eiji, raise your stamina. Your body won't keep up with your movements otherwise. Eiji nodded, clearly expecting this. Izumi, nobody likes weak girls. Increase your training. Izumi turned red, a mix of anger and embarrassment. Ren smirked slightly, but quickly wiped it off his face when Utakata's attention turned to him. Ren, increase your strength training. Ren knew exactly what he meant. He had speed and technique, but against someone with raw power, his lack of strength was a clear weakness. He nodded in understanding. Utakata moved on. Itachi, only the strength you control is your real strength. Itachi gave a slight nod, as if he had already anticipated the advice. Then, Utakata's tone turned sharper. Takeda, you are not the strongest. Takeda tensed, clearly not happy but too smart to argue. Finally, Utakata's gaze landed on Hitoshi Aburame. Unlike with the others, his tone shifted slightly. Hitoshi, good work. Keep doing what you're doing. The class blinked in surprise. Utakata had given no direct praise to anyone else. Hitoshi, for his part, remained completely neutral, simply nodding in acknowledgement. With his evaluations finished, Utakata gave them one last piece of advice. Keep increasing your battle experience as much as you can. It will serve you well in the future. His eyes swept over the students one last time. Dismissed. The students rose to their feet, some stretching, some whispering amongst themselves, but all clearly thinking about his words. Chapter 21, Space and Time. The Lords of the Universe. After finishing his afternoon training, Ren made his way to the library in the evening. As he entered, he gave a polite nod to the old lady at the reception before heading to the first floor, which was open to academy students. The first floor was divided into various sections: history, general information, and ninjutsu. Among the jutsu categories, the fire-style collection was the largest, as expected for Hidden Leaf Village. The lightning-style jutsu collection was the smallest, while wind and earth were more common than lightning but still fewer than water. Ren moved toward the earth jutsu section, already having an idea of what to pick. He had skimmed through most of the E-rank techniques before, so he knew which ones were worth learning. Like with wind jutsu, he chose to focus on them one at a time instead of overwhelming himself. For his first earth jutsu, he selected earth style, earth military movement jutsu, E-rank. Description: this jutsu allows the user to enter the ground and swim through it for a limited time. Usefulness: a great mobility and escape technique, perfect for stealth or surprise attacks. Ren carefully read through all the details, making sure he fully understood the mechanics of the technique. Even though it was an E-rank jutsu, he wanted to be thorough before attempting it. After memorizing the hand seals, he left the library and returned home to practice. The basement was not an option since the floor was solid tiles, so he chose his backyard courtyard instead. Standing in the open space, he took a deep breath and performed the required hand seals, bird tiger ramox. As soon as he completed the final seal, he felt his chakra flow outward, spreading to every pathway closest to his skin. Slowly, his body began to sink into the ground. The sensation was strange. It wasn't like falling, but rather like melting into the earth. Once fully submerged, He attempted to move around. The moment he did, he noticed that his chakra flow increased significantly. So movement requires more chakra. He continued experimenting with the technique, testing different movements and chakra adjustments to see how efficiently he could control it. By the time it was late at night, he had a solid grasp on how the jutsu worked. Satisfied with his progress, Ren headed inside and went straight to bed. Another week passed, and Ren continued to train diligently, focusing on learning, refining, and mastering his earth jutsu. By the end of the week, he had successfully learned the 3 required techniques. Although he could have learned more, he firmly believed that it was better to master 10 jutsu fully than to learn 1,000 and only use 1. The final 3 earth jutsus were earth clone jutsu. Unlike its wind counterpart, this clone had actual substance, made of rock and compacted earth. It could take 2 solid hits before crumbling, making it useful as a defensive decoy. Earth military movement jutsu, already mastered, it allowed him to swim underground, using the earth as a means of mobility and surprise attacks. Earth armor jutsu, a protective technique where Ren could slap a part of his body after performing the seals to coat that area in a layer of hardened earth. If he slapped his chest, his torso would be covered. If he slapped his forehead, his head would be shielded. This technique had immense potential, but it still required 2 hand signs and a slap to activate. With consistent practice, Ren was able to completely remove hand seals from all of his wind jutsu, allowing him to cast them faster than before. However, since earth armor was learned last, he still needed 2 hand signs and a slap to activate it. But that would change. I have to make sure I can activate earth armor instantly without seals. If I can, it'll become an excellent defense. The academy continued its sparring sessions, rotating pairs to match students with worthy opponents. Despite the pair switching, Ren was still matched against Hitachi. He wasn't surprised as he was the only one who could contest with him in the first-year class. Their match unfolded like all their previous fights, fast, intense, and unrelenting. However, this time too the fight had to be stopped. Uekata intervened, declaring the match a tie once again. It wasn't because Hitachi was unable to win. Ren knew that if Hitachi went for the kill, he would have lost. But in a sparring setting, Hitachi couldn't subdue him. Ren's mobility and unpredictable reflexes made him an opponent that couldn't be easily pinned down. As he walked away from the match, Ren contemplated his next steps. Remaining in second place had always been his plan. Hitachi was too monstrous to be surpassed at this stage, and being second would keep him safe from too much attention. However, that plan was becoming increasingly difficult. One evening, his father asked him about his sparring matches with Hitachi. Curious, Ren questioned how he knew about them. That's when he learned the truth. Many influential figures were already keeping an eye on Hitachi. It was only natural that anyone who could stand against him at this age would also attract interest. Ren had to admit, he hadn't considered this. Being Hitachi's rival, even if unofficially, meant that people would take notice of him too. His original plan of staying just below the radar was failing. However, despite knowing this, Ren found himself unable to deliberately lose. What was the point of training if he intentionally held himself back? The only answer was to keep pushing forward. If I don't want to be controlled by others, I have to train even harder. I have to increase my strength. Ren clenched his fists. The path ahead was becoming clearer. If he couldn't hide in the shadows, then he needed to become strong enough that no one could control him. In the evening, Ren sat in the basement, carefully reading the body flicker jutsu scroll his father had given him. Now that he had mastered all 90 rank jutsu, he had finally moved on to his first D-rank technique. This jutsu had seemed underwhelming in the original Naruto anime, where it was treated as basic movement for high-level shinobi. But in all the Naruto fanfics he had read in his past life, body flicker was hyped beyond belief, some even calling it a space-time technique. That was why he was a little excited to finally see what it truly was. As Ren read through the scroll, he sighed. As expected, it's not a space-time jutsu. The jutsu was, in essence, a high-speed movement technique. By using chakra to temporarily vitalize the body, a ninja could move at extreme speeds over short to long distances. To an observer, it appeared like teleportation, but it was purely a matter of speed. The chakra cost depended on the distance and elevation between the user and the intended destination. The scroll emphasized how important this jutsu was. Most experienced shinobi had this technique ingrained into them like an instinct, and the scroll itself advised that the jutsu should be used without hand signs for maximum efficiency. That last part surprised Ren. This is the only jutsu that outright tells you to learn it without hand seals. Then he realized something. This scroll was from his father. Did he modify this, or did he find a rare version with this information? Either way, he wasn't complaining. The required hand seals were Ramok's Tiger. Ren stood up, focusing on the instructions. First, visualize the exact location you want to move to. Second, Steady your body and prepare for the movement. Finally, perform the hand seals and execute the technique. Ren followed the steps and activated the jutsu. Whoosh! His body blurred, and in the blink of an eye, he reappeared 2 tiles ahead. He immediately sat down to analyze what had just happened. It took me 3 full seconds to perform the jutsu. 1 second to visualize the location. 1 second to steady his body. 1 second to perform the hand signs. This was far too slow for a true combat situation. To shorten the time, I need to eliminate the first 2 steps entirely and reduce the hand signs. The first step, visualization, was the biggest obstacle. If he always had to consciously picture his destination, he would never be able to use this instinctively in battle. I need to be able to move instantly, without actively thinking about where I want to go. He knew it wouldn't be difficult to remove the hand seals eventually, just like he did with his wind jutsu. Alright, let's practice. Ren was determined. Once he fully mastered body flicker, he would finally be able to claim the shadow clone jutsu. With that goal in mind, he stood up and prepared to push himself to the limit. Chapter 22, Getting Pegged by the Old Man, Part 2. Another week passed, and Ren had finally reached a point where he could perform all of his jutsu without hand seals. Among them, the hardest to master was body flicker. Eliminating the last hand sign was only possible because he had skipped an entire day of regular training to focus exclusively on body flicker. Even though his speed wasn't instantaneous, it was still far faster than before, making it an extremely valuable technique in his arsenal. By their 3rd sparring session, Ren and Itachi's fights had extended even longer before Utakata had to step in and stop them. This time, neither of them was trading accidental fatal blows. They had both adjusted their strength, making their fights more refined and strategic. Ren knew Itachi was holding back, but the same could be said about himself. As much as he was growing, there was still a clear gap between them. During this time, Ren had also spent a lot of time with Eiji. Eiji had started asking him questions about improving his strength, and Ren had no problem answering. If anything, he actually preferred it. Eiji was the only person Ren could truly call a friend in this world. From his past life, Ren understood that people were social creatures, they weren't meant to walk alone forever. His goal had always been to become stronger, but he knew the path ahead was dangerous. If he could have people willing to walk alongside him, he would gladly welcome it. Seeing Ren's progress with ninjutsu, Eiji had also wanted to start learning some. However, Ren advised him to first improve his chakra control before attempting any jutsu. And since Ren was one of the strongest and smartest people Eiji knew, he took the advice seriously. Since then Eiji had fully mastered tree walking and had moved on to water walking. His strength had also improved significantly. At this point, both he and Hitoshi had reached level 12, making them the strongest after Itachi and Ren. Itachi was still the undisputed strongest at level 30 and Ren had reached level 18. Even though Itachi's level was far ahead, Ren was catching up steadily. At night in Ren's home, tonight was the night. Ren had waited 3 long weeks since the academy started, completing every requirement his father had set for him. He had mastered the necessary jutsu, refined his combat abilities, and improved his physical strength. Now, he would finally claim his reward, the Shadow Clone Jutsu. After finishing his afternoon and evening training, Ren sat at the dinner table, waiting for his father. Juichi entered the house soon after, his single arm carrying a bag as he glanced at Ren. The boy was eating his dinner stiffly, his expression far too serious, as if he was marching into battle. Juichi chuckled and shook his head. Relax. Why are you so tense today? Ren put his spoon down and met his father's gaze. I want the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Juichi nodded immediately, as if he had been expecting it. Sure. But first, let's have some exercise after dinner. Ren nodded, already prepared for whatever test was coming next. Once dinner was finished, both of them headed to the basement, standing face to face in the dimly lit underground room. Juichi's calm expression gave nothing away. All right, he said, rolling his only shoulder loosely. Come at me with all your strength. Don't hold back. Then, a smirk appeared on his lips. And don't worry, losing an arm hasn't made me weak. I can still handle most jonin out there, so you definitely aren't a problem. Ren's eyes sharpened, and without another word, he rushed forward. Ren closed the distance in a blink, throwing a fast right jab aimed at Juichi's ribs. Juichi didn't even move his feet, he simply tilted his upper body slightly, letting Ren's fist graze past him. Before Ren could retract his punch, Juichi flicked his wrist with 2 fingers, sending a sharp sting up Ren's arm. Too slow. Ren grit his teeth and immediately twisted his body, bringing up his left leg for a high kick. Juichi took half a step back, dodging the attack so effortlessly that it felt like Ren was moving in slow motion. As Ren landed, he threw a low sweeping kick aimed at Juichi's ankle, attempting to disrupt his balance. Juichi didn't even look down, he simply lifted his foot at the last second, avoiding the sweep entirely. Predictable. Ren gritted his teeth. It didn't matter how fast he was, Juichi was always a step ahead. Realizing that close combat was useless, Ren immediately pulled out 3 shuriken from his thigh holster and flicked them toward Juichi. Juichi tilted his head slightly, and the first shuriken whizzed past his ear. The second and third were casually dodged, barely even grazing his clothing. But then, the moment the shuriken passed him, they all suddenly changed direction, veering straight toward his back. Ren smirked. Projectile control jutsu. But just as he thought he had an opening, Juichi twisted his body effortlessly, stepping aside as all 3 shuriken flew past him once again. Nice try. Ren didn't waste time. His hands flicked sharply, and the shuriken suddenly changed direction again, this time flying back toward Juichi from multiple angles. A nearly invisible string glinted under the dim light of the basement. Shuriken wire manipulation. This time, Ren was sure he had him. But Juichi's smirk only widened. At the last moment, he simply tilted his head and shifted his weight, letting all the shuriken miss him by mere centimeters. Not a single one landed. Ren gritted his teeth in frustration. Switching tactics, Ren suddenly vanished in a blur, activating body flicker to reposition himself behind Juichi. As he reappeared, he launched a powerful kick, aimed directly at Juichi's back. But before the attack could land, Juichi vanished. The next second, a sharp flick landed on the back of Ren's head, too predictable. Ren spun around, but Juichi was already gone again. Before he could react, a tap landed on his shoulder. Too slow. Ren threw a wild punch in frustration, only to hit nothing but air. Juichi was playing with him. Come on, Ren. Ren continued his relentless assault, throwing everything he had at Juichi. His attacks were sharp, his movements precise, and his strategies well planned, but nothing seemed to work. No matter what tricks he used, Juichi evaded, countered, or simply outmaneuvered him with ease. It was like fighting a mountain, immovable, untouchable, and always one step ahead. Then, without warning, everything changed. Juichi shifted from defensive to offensive in an instant. Ren's instincts screamed at him, if even one strike landed, he was done for. His father was no longer playing around. A fist shot toward him like a bullet, and Ren barely managed to twist away. Another strike came, then another. He dodged, flickered back, sidestepped, and weaved through them all, but the pressure was overwhelming. His body was moving purely on instinct now, and he didn't even have the time to think about countering. In a desperate move, Ren activated earth armor, slapping his arm as the hardened earth wrapped around it. The very next moment, Juichi's fist collided against the armor, sending a violent shock through his entire arm. He flickered immediately, vanishing just as another strike was about to land, but something was different. Juichi's eyes flickered with something that could only be described as amusement. Ren had no time to process it as he buried into the ground, using his earth military movement jutsu to escape. At the same time, an earth clone took his place. Juichi's wide smile was the only warning before he punched the clone into the floor. The entire ground exploded outward, sending debris flying as if a bomb had gone off. Ren shot up from the ground, flickering away from the destruction. But as soon as he reappeared midair, a stone was flying toward him at an impossible speed. There was no way to dodge. His eyes widened, instincts screaming once again, but before his brain could even process the situation, his legs split apart instinctively, dropping him into a full 180-degree split as the stone whizzed past his face. His hands pressed against the floor as he panted heavily, sweat dripping from his forehead. Juichi flickered in front of him. Ren tightened his grip on his kunai, preparing for another round, but Juichi suddenly raised a hand. Stop. That's enough. Ren froze, still breathing heavily. You did really good. I wasn't expecting this much. Ren let out a breathless chuckle, then collapsed onto his back, sprawled out on the floor. Thanks. Juichi stood in front of him, looking down at him with an approving nod. You did well getting the jutsu's combat ready. If you hadn't, I would have been disappointed. Ren sighed in relief, knowing his guess had been right. His father had wanted to see if he could use ninjutsu in real combat, not just as flashy techniques. Your taijutsu is improving, and your speed is excellent and your reaction speed is also very good. Saying this, Juichi's expression was quite peculiar, but Ren didn't notice. He continued, your defensive jutsu are solid, but you need more offensive ninjutsu. Right now, you're already above almost all geinin, and many chunin would struggle against you. But a jonin? They'd still take you down easily. Ren absorbed the words carefully, knowing they weren't meant to discourage him, just a realistic evaluation of where he stood. Then, Juichi pulled out a scroll and tossed it to him. Here's your reward. Ren's hand snatched it out of the air instantly, pocketing it quickly just in case his father changed his mind. Juichi chuckled, stepping forward to ruffle his hair. Don't try it today. Get some rest, and test it out tomorrow. Ren nodded, still lying flat on the floor. I assessed your chakra during the fight. You can easily make one clone and push for two, but there's no need for that yet. Stick to one for now. With that, Juichi flickered out of sight, leaving Ren alone in the basement. For a long moment, Ren just lay there, staring at the ceiling. His body was aching, his muscles sore, but there was a small grin on his lips. He had finally earned the shadow clone jutsu. The exhaustion hit him like a wave. Without even bothering to clean up, he dragged himself upstairs, collapsed onto his bed, and fell asleep almost instantly. Tomorrow, a new phase of training would begin. But for now, he would rest. Chapter 23, Who is the Real One? Ren woke up at his usual time, his body clock already conditioned to his rigorous schedule. The day proceeded as normal, morning training, academy classes, and afternoon training. But throughout the day, he couldn't stop himself from randomly grinning. At one point, AG gave him a weird look and muttered, "Did you finally lose it, Speedo?" Ren just laughed again, not bothering to explain. By evening, he rushed home early, excitement clear on his face as he entered the basement. This was it. Although his entire body itched to try the jutsu immediately, Ren forced himself to calm down. The shadow clone jutsu was something every Naruto fan knew how to perform, Ren included. But this wasn't an anime or a fan fiction. This was reality. He wasn't going to be arrogant and assume that what he thought he knew was enough. Shadow clones didn't just split chakra, they split the mind as well. Messing it up could be disastrous. With that thought in mind, he unrolled the scroll and carefully read through every detail. Unlike basic clones, shadow clones were fully physical copies of the user. They shared the same clothing, appearance, and even damage as the original. Chakra was split evenly among all clones, meaning making too many could lead to chakra depletion or even death. Clones were capable of independent thought but were still linked to the original. Memories and experiences from the clone would return to the original upon dispersal. Ren read each line carefully, committing the information to memory. Finally, he reached the hand seal. Ram. That was all that was needed. Ren stood up, took a deep breath, and performed the seal. Poof. A puff of smoke appeared beside him, revealing a shadow clone. However, something was off. The clone was slightly deformed and pale, its chakra unstable. It wasn't as bad as Naruto's clones in the anime, but it was still far from perfect. Ren dispersed the clone, feeling his chakra return to him. A tiny fraction of his chakra was missing, but it wasn't enough to affect him. Alright, not bad for a first try. Let's do it again. Ren repeated the process several times, adjusting his chakra flow each time. The clones gradually improved, becoming more solid, more stable. Finally, after several attempts, it happened. With another poof, an identical version of himself stood beside him. It was perfect. Same face, same height, same clothes. The clone stretched its arms, looking at its hands before glancing at Ren. Well, that didn't take long. Ren grinned. He had finally done it. The shadow clone jutsu was now his. Ren took out a cloth strip from his bag and tied it over his eyes, blocking his vision completely. Holding a kunai in his hand, he handed it to his shadow clone and gave a simple instruction. Do something with it, then dispel yourself. The clone nodded, taking the kunai and moving around the room. Even though Ren couldn't see, he focused entirely on the subtle shifts in the air, the faintest sounds of movement. A moment later, there was a poof as the clone disappeared. Ren removed the cloth, stood up, and without hesitation, walked directly to the table and retrieved the kunai. A grin formed on his face. Even though I couldn't see, I now have the memory of the clone hiding the kunai behind the table. That confirms it, memory transfer works perfectly. With this, he could finally train even more efficiently. The implications were massive. Even though shadow clones didn't return physical feedback, they could still be used to train ninjutsu, chakra control, and even theoretical knowledge. At this point, Ren's biggest priority was physical training. In the past 3 weeks, although his strength had continued to increase, it was nowhere near as fast as before. The early gains had slowed, which was expected, but now that he could use a shadow clone, he could dedicate more time to pushing his limits. If I can maintain a clone for long durations, I'll be able to train twice as much. It was the perfect tool to maximize his progress. As he thought about his next steps, Ren's eyes drifted toward his mastery panel. Shadow Clone Jutsu -10%, basic, he frowned slightly. Why does Shadow Clone have its own mastery? All elemental jutsu were grouped under their respective elemental mastery. All supplementary jutsu, like the Academy 3 and Body Flicker, were categorized under chakra control mastery. Yet somehow, Shadow Clone Jutsu stood alone. He had no idea why. Asking the system was pointless, it never gave him straight answers when it came to mastery mechanics. He decided to let it go for now. The important thing wasn't understanding why the system worked the way it did. The important thing was increasing his mastery and pushing his limits. Ren squared off against his shadow clone, engaging in a brief spar to test its combat capabilities. The results were exactly what he expected. Their strength was identical, their reaction speeds were the same, and there was no noticeable difference between them. Ren had effectively created a second version of himself. After the spar, he sat down to recover and noticed something interesting. His chakra was slowly regenerating. A question formed in his mind. If I don't dispel the clone, and it isn't forced to dispel, can it be maintained indefinitely? At first, the idea seemed too good to be true. But after some thought, he shook his head. No, that's not possible. The clone also needs chakra to sustain itself. The longer it exists, the more chakra it must consume. And any actions it performs will also drain chakra. This meant there was a limit to how long a clone could remain active. He decided to test it. Ren gave his shadow clone a task, to continue practicing the leaf-splitting exercise while he slept. If his theory was correct, the clone would eventually run out of chakra and dispel itself. When Ren woke up, he felt something new in his mind, memories from his clone. His shadow clone had lasted exactly 2 hours before dispelling. And more importantly, he had gained slight progress in his leaf-splitting training. As he sat up, a system message appeared. Chakra control mastery plus 1%, chakra control mastery minus 56%, intermediate, wind style mastery plus 1%, wind style mastery minus 28%, beginner. Ren's eyes narrowed. So the knowledge and experience my clones gain directly convert into mastery percentages. If this was true, then this jutsu was even more broken than he had imagined. He could grind mastery endlessly, provided he had enough chakra to sustain clones. But before he could get too excited, another thought entered his mind. What about the original drawback of the shadow clone jutsu? In the anime, it was said people would suffer severe migraines when dispelling too many clones at once. If that drawback still existed, it meant there was a limit to how much information he could absorb at once. But if it didn't? A grin spread across his face. Then I can't abuse this so bad. With that thought, he got up from his bed and made another clone. Ren created another shadow clone, but this time he didn't need to give it any instructions. The previous night's training had already set the task in place, so as soon as the clone appeared, it automatically began practicing the leaf-splitting exercise without needing to be reminded. Ren was very happy using the shadow clones. I can now progress in 2 things at once without even thinking about it. It was only leaf-splitting for now, but soon, he would expand the range of his clone's training. His next step was get more E-rank jutsu from the library so that his clone could continuously train different techniques. Ask his father for higher rank wind and earth jutsu to expand his offensive capabilities and focus on perfecting each jutsu to the point where they were combat ready, rather than just memorize techniques. With shadow clones, he could dedicate as much time as he wanted to perfecting every jutsu in his arsenal. The possibilities were endless. After around 2 hours, the clone dispelled on its own. As Ren checked his mastery panel, something immediately caught his eye. Chakra control mastery minus 56.09%, wind style mastery minus 28.20%. For the first time ever, he saw fractional increases in his mastery percentage. This meant that every small action performed by his clones contributed to mastery gain, even if it was just a tiny amount. Then, something else happened. A stream of information flowed into his mind. Not only did he remember everything the clone had done, but there was no headache. No mental strain. Nothing. Ren's eyes narrowed as he realized what this meant. Wait. Why am I not feeling anything? Shouldn't there be at least some strain from memory overload? Then, a hypothesis formed in his mind. The system is intercepting the clone's memories first, converting them into mastery percentages, and then transferring them to me instantly. This meant that his brain never directly handled the massive information load, removing any risk of mental backlash. Thus he had no limit on how much knowledge he could absorb from clones. As soon as he finished processing this thought, a system notification rang. INT +1, Ren's eyes widened, then his grin stretched from ear to ear. I was right. This wasn't just useful, it was game-breaking. In the original Naruto world, using too many shadow clones caused crippling migraines due to information overload. But for Ren, there was no limit. There was no penalty. He could abuse this technique endlessly without consequence. He laughed out loud as he ran forward, his heart pounding with excitement. This is amazing. With shadow clones, the system, and his own intelligence, his growth was about to become unstoppable. Chapter 24, Snake and Wolf. 6 months had passed since the academy began, and during this time, a shocking piece of news spread across Hidden Leaf Village. Orochimaru of the Sannin had defected. Caught conducting horrific human experiments on villagers, including young children, his actions had caused an uproar throughout the entire village. Some were angry, others devastated, but most were simply in disbelief. No one had expected one of the legendary Sannin, a hero of Hidden Leaf Village, to betray them so completely. Orochimaru's defection left another massive hole in Hidden Leaf Village's strength, right after the devastation caused by the Nine Tails attack. The village was already weakened, and now, one of its strongest shinobi was gone. Panic spread among the villagers. There was no telling if another nation might take advantage of Hidden Leaf Village's weakened state and launch an attack. But as always, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, stepped forward. With his calm demeanor and undeniable strength, he reassured the people, promising that nothing would happen to Hidden Leaf Village under his watch. And like the sheep they were, the villagers clung to his words. Hiruzen's power was absolute in their eyes, so if he said Hidden Leaf Village was safe, then it was. Ren had watched the Hokage's speech, standing among the crowd. But what caught his attention the most wasn't the speech itself. It was Hiruzen himself. The old man looked way older than he had 6 months ago. His shoulders were heavier, his face more wrinkled, his eyes duller. Ren knew exactly why. Orochimaru had been his favorite disciple, his pride and joy. And even though he had the chance to kill him, he couldn't bear to do it. The result? A broken man, clinging to a village that was falling apart beneath him. But for Ren, Orochimaru's defection was nothing more than a passing moment in his life. While Hidden Leaf Village mourned the loss of one of its legends, Ren continued his training. His father, Juichi, became even busier, sometimes not coming home for 3 days straight. But Ren didn't let that slow him down. He had already perfected his training system. Every time one clone dispelled, he would immediately create another one. Over time, his shadow clone jutsu mastery had skyrocketed to 48%. Now, his clones could last for 4 hours before running out of chakra. However, when practicing ninjutsu, the time was cut in half, lasting only 2 hours due to the higher chakra consumption. But that didn't matter. Because Ren knew one thing for certain, he was growing stronger every single day. Location Academy, the classroom was silent, the air filled with tension as all the students sat at their desks, waiting. At the front of the room stood Utakata-sensei, his expression as blank and unreadable as ever. Despite spending half a year under his teaching, Ren had never once seen the man's expression change. Today was no different. It will soon be 6 months since you all joined the academy. His calm, monotonous voice carried across the classroom, but there was an underlying weight to his words. Now, it is time for an exam. A few students stiffened, while others exchanged glances of uncertainty. Utakata continued. Even though you have taken many tests in the past months, this exam will be different. It will be observed by people you will not see. If you impress them, you may receive a reward. If you disappoint them, punishment will follow. Silence. The atmosphere shifted, a mix of nervousness and curiosity spread through the class. Ren, however, was calm. Because he had already figured it out. Classic carrot and stick approach. This was a way to motivate them, but more importantly, this wasn't just an academy test. It meant outside forces were involved. His guess? The observers would likely include members of the Hidden Leaf Village Council and various departments, each looking for potential recruits to mold into their ideal shinobi. Utakata's monotonous voice continued, his words carrying a weight that wasn't there before. The test consists of a theoretical exam and practical exams. I won't expand on the contents of the theory exam. However, the practical exam will be a fight. A few students perked up, while others looked slightly uneasy. But it was the next part that truly changed the atmosphere. This time, you may use anything you want. Ninjutsu, taijutsu, weapons, it does not matter. The only restrictions are that you cannot kill your opponent or remove any part of their body. However, you are allowed to injure them until they concede. A noticeable flinch ran through some students. Ren noticed how some of the more cautious ones tensed up, while others, like Hitachi, Eiji, and Hitoshi, remained completely unfazed. Utakata didn't acknowledge the reaction. He simply continued, voice cold and firm. The primary purpose of a shinobi is to fight. No matter what your strong point is, if you cannot use it to improve your strength, then I don't think you should continue as a shinobi. This was the first time Utakata had spoken with such sharpness in his tone. For the past 6 months, he had always been straightforward, but never this blunt. Ren's mind worked quickly as he processed the shift in tone. This isn't just about the test. Something changed. And there was only one major event that had recently shaken the village. Orochimaru's defection. So it's finally trickling down to the academy. The village was weakened, losing Orochimaru after already suffering the Nine Tails attack had left them exposed. And now, They were pushing harder to strengthen the next generation as quickly as possible. They need to fill the roster fast. This test wasn't just about assessing progress, it was about forcing growth. For the past 6 months, Ren had wrestled with a recurring thought. Should he continue standing out? Wouldn't it be safer to stay low-key, avoiding unnecessary attention? But in the end, he had came to a simple conclusion: there's no point worrying about things outside my control. He had trained. He had grown stronger. And the only thing that mattered now was proving it. His mind was clear as Utakata continued explaining the details of the test. Ren wasn't going to hold back. Let whoever was watching see. Because in the end, he wasn't just another student in the academy. He was Ren Takahashi. And he wasn't here to be second place forever. Location home. After completing his daily training, Ren sat at his desk, a pencil in hand, sketching something with deep focus. A weapon. A pair of gloves with retractable claws. Ren had previously asked his father about using a weapon, but at the time, Juichi had refused, insisting that Ren should focus on his body first. But recently, after seeing Ren's rapid growth, Juichi had finally given him permission. His reasoning was simple: you're growing too fast. If you don't start training with a weapon now, your body will take longer to adapt later. Ren had agreed, but that left him with one big question: what kind of weapon should I use? He had spent a long time thinking about it. He needed something that wouldn't interfere with his fighting style. Something he could still use while performing ninjutsu. Something that could enhance his wind and earth techniques instead of limiting them. Then, he remembered Wolverine's claws from his past life. They would be perfect for ninjutsu, razor sharp for slicing, fast and deadly in close combat, and easy to reinforce with chakra flow. But there was one major issue: if I use the claws like that, they'll interfere with my hand signs. And more than that, they wouldn't be as useful for earth jutsu. So, he needed to modify the idea. Instead of claws extending from his fingers, Ren redesigned them to emerge from the middle of the back of his hands. Retractable claws to keep them hidden when not in use. Attached to gloves so they wouldn't hinder his movements. Designed with durability in mind, so they wouldn't break easily. Flexible grip to allow full freedom for taijutsu and ninjutsu. In its normal state, the gloves would look completely ordinary, nothing more than simple combat gloves. But when extended, they would become a deadly weapon. Originally, Ren had assumed he'd need to ask his father for the funds to get them made. But then he remembered Utakata's announcement about the upcoming test. If you impress them, you might get a reward. Ren had no doubt in his mind that he would stand out. And since he couldn't exactly ask for a high-level jutsu like the Flying Thunder God, he figured, why not let the village pay for my weapon? If it was going to be a reward from Hidden Leaf Village, then the quality would be top tier. With a satisfied grin, Ren added the final details to his design. Then, placing the finished blueprint beside his bed, he laid down. Chapter 25, Fight. Ren returned home from his morning training to find his father already seated at the table, breakfast prepared. As usual, Juichi was efficient, his one arm didn't slow him down in the slightest. As Ren sat down, Juichi casually asked, "So, you ready for the exam?" Ren grinned confidently. "Of course." Juichi nodded approvingly, then added, "The first exam is usually more important. Many people will be paying attention, so you need to do well. If you impress them, you'll get a good reward." Ren was already aware of this, but hearing it from his father reinforced its importance. Then, Juichi asked, "By the way, have you decided what you want?" Ren didn't hesitate. "Yes, I want this." He pulled out the scroll containing his weapon design and handed it over. Juichi unrolled the scroll and studied it carefully. His sharp shinobi instincts allowed him to immediately grasp its practical advantages. A blade-type weapon pairs well with wind-style jutsu. Since the claws are retractable, they won't interfere with earth jutsu either. "You've thought this through well." Ren smiled as he took back the scroll. Juichi then added, "When you submit this, ask Utakata to meet me." Ren was surprised to hear his father refer to his instructor so casually. "You know each other?" Juichi chuckled. "Of course. We were teammates in our Geinin and Chunin days. Even completed some missions together as Jonin." Ren blinked in surprise. "Sensei is a Jonin? I thought academy instructors were all Chunin." After all, his observe panel still couldn't read Utakata's level, meaning the man had to be higher than level 45. Juichi nodded, confirming his suspicion. "Yes, Utakata is a Jonin. And a strong one, too. After the Nine Tails attack, he was assigned to the academy just in case something happened. But I doubt he'll stay here for more than a year." Ren processed the information. "So, Hidden Leaf Village assigned a Jonin-level instructor just to oversee our class?" It made sense. The village was unstable, and with Orochimaru's defection, they needed to keep a close eye on the younger generation. With this in mind, Ren finished his breakfast, grabbed his scroll, and left for the academy. Today was going to be a big day. Location Academy. The academy looked the same as usual, students moving around, conversations filling the air, nothing visibly different. But Ren knew better. As soon as he entered the premises, his observe panel picked up at least 10 hidden presences, all marked with question marks instead of levels. He didn't stare too long, no need to draw attention to himself. Instead, he walked straight to his classroom, taking his usual seat beside AJ. At exactly 9 a.m., Unikata appeared at the front of the classroom, holding a stack of papers in his hand. His expression remained as unreadable as ever, his tone calm and controlled as he spoke. Good morning. As I told you yesterday, the exam will consist of 2 parts, written and practical. You will have 2 hours for the written exam, and the practical exam will last as long as needed. With that, he began distributing the exam sheets. As soon as the clock hit 9:05, his voice rang out, begin. The classroom fell into immediate silence. Ren flipped over the paper and began scanning the questions. They were definitely harder than the ones in the entrance exam, a mix of tactical scenarios, basic ninjutsu theory, mathematical problems for resource allocation, questions about Hidden Lee Village's political and military structure, and of course the Will of Fire. Despite the difficulty increase, none of the questions were challenging enough for Ren to need his information-gathering skill, cheating. He simply answered one after another, moving at a steady pace. Time ticked forward, and soon it was 11:05 a.m. Unikata's voice cut through the silence. Stop. Pencils down, or you fail. Every student immediately obeyed. Without hesitation, Unikata collected the papers one by one, stacking them neatly before turning back to the class. His next words were simple. You have 25 minutes of break time. Meet me at the academy training ground at 11:30 sharp. Then, in a swift flicker, he vanished. The students, finally free from the written portion, emptied the classroom in an orderly manner. For most of them, the real challenge was still ahead. And Ren couldn't wait. Location Academy Training Ground. By 11:30, nearly all the students had already gathered at the training ground. Nobody wanted to risk being late under the watchful eyes of the invisible observers. Even though they couldn't see anyone, the heavy atmosphere made it clear, they were being watched. Some of the more perceptive students even felt a faint prickling sensation at their backs. Standing beside Ren, AG furrowed his brows, muttering in a low voice, I feel like so many people are watching me. Ren gave a soft hum in response. They are. Sensei told us about the observers. Just do your best and impress them. Have you thought about what you want if asked? AG nodded, his expression still tense. Yeah. I'll ask for money since I don't really want anything right now. Ren was momentarily speechless. But after a second, he understood. AG wasn't interested in weapons, so asking for one would be pointless. He also couldn't use higher-ranked jutsu yet, even body flicker was difficult for him. So, asking for money was actually a practical decision. Ren's thoughts were cut short as Unikata flickered into the training ground. His calm, unreadable voice echoed through the field. We will do this like our normal sparring classes. I will call you in pairs, and you will fight. First match, AG Nakamura vs Takeru Uchiha. Step forward. Ren turned to AG and smirked. Good luck. AG grinned and stepped forward excitedly, while Takeru Uchiha sneered, clearly considering AG beneath him. However, he kept his mouth shut, clearly mindful of Unikata's presence. Do the seal of confrontation. They joined hands, forming the traditional half-tiger seal. Unikata's next words were sharp and clear. Severe injuries and killing are not allowed. Begin. The moment the fight started, AG dashed forward first. Takeda met him head-on, raising his fists expecting a standard exchange of blows. But he was wrong. AG's attack patterns were completely unpredictable. One moment, his punches and kicks were rapid and aggressive, and the next, he was twisting his body in unnatural ways to dodge and counterattack. It was chaotic yet precise. Takeda struggled to land a clean hit while AG's attacks kept forcing him on the defensive. The students watching were clearly surprised. The great Uchiha was getting pushed back by a civilian-born shinobi. Ren simply watched, arms crossed. AG's movements are wild, but they work. Takeda can't keep up. Realizing he was losing in close combat, Takeda quickly leaped back, creating distance. His hands blurred into hand signs. AG's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't panic. Takeda took a deep breath and shouted, Fire style, fireball jutsu. A large ball of flames erupted from his mouth, rushing toward AG with deadly heat. But Takeda's execution was far from perfect. The fireball was slower than it should have been, and the hand signs were too deliberate. AG had enough time to react. At the last second, he replaced himself with a log, using substitution jutsu to escape the attack. The fireball crashed into the ground, scorching the dirt and sending heat waves through the air. Takeda landed, his breath heavy, clearly feeling the chalk raw rain. But AG was already behind him. The moment Takeda turned around, AG was already mid-sprint. A set of kunai flew from his hands, aimed straight for Takeda. Takeda dodged quickly, but one grazed his cheek, leaving a thin line of blood. For a brief second, he froze. That was all AG needed. In that instant, he closed the distance and placed a kunai against Takeda's throat. Takeda's eyes widened in shock and humiliation. He had lost. His body tensed, and his pride screamed at him to keep fighting, but the sharp, cold steel against his skin told him otherwise. His jaw clenched. Then, through gritted teeth, he muttered, "I surrender." Silence fell over the field as Utakata nodded in acknowledgement. Winner, AG Nakamura. AG grinned, stepping back as he lowered his kunai. Meanwhile, Takeda's face twisted in frustration, but he didn't argue. The fight was over. Ren smirked, watching from the sidelines. A predictable outcome. During these 6 months, AG had reached level 16, while Takeda was still stuck at level 13. The difference in strength was clear. Before Ren could deliberate more about the outcome, Utakata-sensei already called out the next name. Ren Takahashi and Itachi Uchiha stepped forward. Ren grinned as he moved towards the center. "Let's see how this goes." He was very excited. The difference between his and Itachi's level had narrowed. When they had their first fight they had a difference of 12 level and Ren had struggled to maintain the tie, but now their level difference was 8 levels. Itachi had reached level 33 in this time. Clearly his growth had slowed down somewhat. This was the chance for Ren to catch up with him, and this fight would prove that all his efforts were not in vain. Chapter 26, Uchihas are not so great after all. As soon as Ren and Itachi's names were called, the students erupted in excitement. This was the fight everyone had been waiting for. It was no secret that Ren and Itachi were the two strongest in the class. Both were fast, skilled, and unpredictable, and unlike the other fights, this one had a genuine air of suspense. Some students were even placing silent bets, while others, especially the girls, were watching closely since both fighters were also considered the most handsome in the class. Of course, neither Itachi nor Ren cared about that. As they stepped forward to the center of the field, their eyes met in understanding. There were no words needed. They both knew what the other was capable of. With calm, precise movements, they formed the seal of confrontation and waited for Utakata's signal. For the first time, Utakata didn't silence the excited students. He simply let the tension build before giving the command. "Begin." The moment the words left Utakata's mouth, both Ren and Itachi exploded into action. A blur of motion and steel, as they clashed midway, kunai meeting kunai. Sparks erupted as their blades scraped against each other in rapid succession. Their movements were fast, precise, and unrelenting, neither giving an inch. The air was filled with the sound of clashing metal, as they weaved, parried, and countered, moving at speeds that had the other students barely able to keep up. Suddenly, Ren flickered out of existence. Using body flicker, he reappeared directly behind Itachi, his kunai aiming for a clean strike. But Itachi, calm as ever, reacted instantly, ducking, spinning, and countering with a high kick. Ren dodged and jumped back, landing gracefully, but Itachi had already formed the tiger seal. Fire style, fireball jutsu. Unlike Takeda's weak attempt, Itachi's fireball was faster, hotter, and perfectly controlled. Ren's eyes sharpened as the flames rushed toward him. He didn't waste time. With a flicker, he vanished and reappeared several meters away, dodging the fireball completely. But Itachi was already on the move. Itachi flicked his hand, and a barrage of shuriken filled the air, curving unnaturally toward Ren. Ren immediately weaved through them, dodging the ones he could and parrying the rest with his kunai. But Itachi had already read his movements. As soon as Ren landed, a kunai was flying straight for his blind spot. With no time to dodge, Ren did something unexpected. He used clone jutsu. 2 clones popped into existence, both rushing forward while Ren himself jumped back. Itachi narrowed his eyes. He immediately flicked 2 more shuriken, cutting through one clone instantly, but the other clone dodged and kept moving forward. At the same time, Ren rushed from the side. Itachi prepared to counterattack, but then a sudden gust of wind from the remaining clone distracted him. It was just a basic blast of air from the dissipation of the other clone, which was actually a wind clone, but it was enough to make Itachi hesitate for half a second. That was all Ren needed. His kunai plunged forward, aimed for Itachi's chest. Itachi instinctively raised his arm, blocking the strike, but Ren had already activated projectile control. The direction of his hand-holding kunai subtly shifted, bypassing Itachi's guard and heading straight for his heart. But Itachi wasn't done yet. At the last possible moment, his free hand shot up, intercepting the kunai. A sharp pain spread through his palm, but he stopped the attack. A second later, Ren felt a stabbing pain in his left arm. Itachi's kunai had found its mark. A sharp gasp spread through the watching students. For the first time, blood had been drawn. Ren and Itachi stared at each other, their injured hands bleeding, but neither reacted as they jumped back, creating distance. They both knew the next exchange would decide the fight. Silently, they prepared. Ren's kunai began to glow, as he channeled wind chakra into its edge, sharpening it to the extreme. At the same time, Itachi began forming rapid hand signs, preparing a jutsu. Around him, several smaller fireballs began forming, hovering ominously in the air. The watching students held their breath. For a moment, the world stood still. Then, in an instant, Ren threw his enhanced kunai, aiming for Itachi's head. At the same time, Itachi unleashed his flurry of fireballs, sending them flying toward Ren. The match was about to reach its climax, but suddenly, two figures flickered into the battlefield. Uekata himself flickered before Ren, and water burst from his mouth, forming a protective wall that completely neutralized the fireballs. At the same time, a man with black hair and sharp eyes appeared in front of Itachi and spit out a burst of fire, disintegrating Ren's kunai before it could reach Itachi. A moment of silence followed. Then, Uekata's voice rang out, as calm as ever. "The match is a tie." His eyes swept across the battlefield before explaining. If Ren Takahashi's kunai had hit, Itachi Uchiha would have suffered severe cuts that could have damaged his chakra pathways. If Itachi's fireballs had landed, Ren Takahashi would have sustained third-degree burns across multiple body parts. The students were stunned. Many had forgotten to breathe during the last moments of the fight. Meanwhile, Ren's eyes flickered toward the man who had protected Itachi. Before flickering away, the man gave him another glance, an unmistakable Uchiha gaze. Ren narrowed his eyes. But before he could think further, Uekata stepped forward. "The next match, step forward." And just like that, the fight was over. As soon as Uekata dismissed the fight, the students began chatting excitedly about the fights, their performances, and the upcoming results. Eiji was still buzzing with excitement, practically bouncing in place as he turned to Ren. "That was so cool. You could have won if Sensei hadn't intervened." Ren gave a wry smile. He wasn't so sure. Itachi was a monster in his own right, and even though Ren had managed to injure him, the fight could have gone either way. But what bothered him the most wasn't the outcome, it was why Uekata and Uchiha had intervened in the first place. Were they really worried about injuries? Or was there something else? He made a mental note to ask Uekata about it later. As they stood in line, an academy instructor approached Ren, stopping in front of him. "Stand still. I'll heal your arm." The man formed a quick set of hand signs, and a soft green glow appeared around his hand. Ren felt a cool, soothing sensation spread through his arm as the torn muscles began knitting themselves back together. "It was just a flesh wound, nothing serious," the instructor said after finishing. "But if you feel any discomfort later, came to the infirmary." "Understood. Thank you." Ren replied with a nod. The instructor nodded back and moved toward Itachi, who was also receiving the same treatment. Ren watched for a moment before turning back to the field. The rest of the fights soon came to an end, but there was an unexpected development. During her match with Hitoshi, Izumi Uchiha activated her Sharingan. The other students were stunned. Even Itachi hadn't awakened his Sharingan yet, so to see Izumi, someone no one expected, be the first to awaken it was a huge shock. Ren narrowed his eyes, carefully observing the single Tomoe spinning in her left eye. "So, the first Sharingan user of our generation appears." While he wasn't obsessed with the Uchiha's legendary Dujutsu, he couldn't deny its power. But despite activating her Sharingan, Izumi still lost to Hitoshi. Her defeat wasn't because of a lack of skill or abilities, it was because she was terrified of bugs. Whenever Hitoshi's insects got too close, she would panic and make reckless moves, allowing him to control the pace of the fight until she was forced to surrender. A powerful Dujutsu is useless if fear controls you. Ren thought to himself. By the time the last match concluded, most of the hidden observers had disappeared. Only a few remained, likely waiting to give their final evaluations before leaving. Uekata then stepped forward, his usual calm, unreadable expression on his face. "The practical exam is over. Your results have been recorded, and you will know them soon." His gaze swept across the students, stopping briefly on a few individuals. "Many of you have given an impressive performance." Ren noticed his eyes linger on him, Itachi, Eiji, Hitoshi, and a few others. "But some of you were disappointing." This time, Uekata's gaze hardened as he looked at Takeda, Izumi, and a few others who had underperformed. "Ouch," Ren thought, watching Takeda's face twist in humiliation and Izumi's in embarrassment. "Guess that Uchiha pride is taking a hit." Uekata didn't dwell on the moment for long as he continued. "Tomorrow is a holiday. Rest well. When you return the day after tomorrow, you will find out whether you are receiving a reward or a punishment." There was a heavy silence after those words. The implication was clear: if you had impressed the right people, you'd be rewarded. If you had disappointed them, you'd be punished. After letting that sink in, Yukata finally gave the signal. Dismissed. Chapter 27, Reflection. Talking and new stuff. Ren sat cross-legged on the basement floor, deep in thought as he reflected on the fight with Itachi. He hadn't left a shadow clone today since he wanted to preserve his full chakra reserves for the battle. Though in hindsight, it wouldn't have made much of a difference. His jutsu arsenal wasn't particularly chakra-intensive. He had learned many wind jutsus, but most were utility-based rather than large-scale destructive techniques. His wind-style mastery had reached 56%, yet he still lacked C-rank offensive jutsu that could truly turn the tide in a fight. I need stronger wind jutsu. Something that can actually deal serious damage rather than just assisting me in combat, he thought. During his fight with Itachi, the jutsu he instinctively used the most was Body Flicker, followed closely by Wind Clone and Shuriken Control. These had been the best choices for that specific scenario. He had other jutsu that might have worked, but the fast pace of the fight left no room for anything unnecessary. His Earth jutsu remained completely hidden, since Utakata had interfered before he could counter Itachi's final attack. At this point, the image he had shown to others was clear: a fast fighter with exceptional speed, a high-level grasp of Body Flicker, good taijutsu, and a growing proficiency in wind style. If someone tried to evaluate him, they would probably place him at a high gain-in level, which was not far from the truth, but still left gaps in their understanding of his full strength. Ren let out a sigh. I decided not to hold back. Yet somehow, I still have some hidden cards. If people start noticing that I always have something extra up my sleeve, they might become too interested in figuring out what else I'm hiding. The thought lingered in his mind, but before he could dwell on it further, the basement door creaked open and a familiar figure flickered into the room. Juichi appeared directly in front of Ren, his sharp eyes immediately scanning his injured arm. Before Ren could say anything, Juichi had already grabbed it, checking for any lingering damage. After a moment, he let out a relieved sigh and sat down beside Ren. You worry me, brat, Juichi muttered, rubbing his temples. Ren blinked in mild surprise. His father rarely spoke in such a vulnerable tone. Even though this was just an academy exam, you still got injured. Juichi sighed again, shaking his head. I know it was just a small wound today. But I keep thinking about what might happen in the future. Ren remained silent, watching his father with a newfound sense of understanding. For Juichi, Ren wasn't just a talented academy student, he was his son. Even if it was just a minor wound today, what about next time? What about when the real battles started? Juichi let out another sigh, this one quieter than before. You don't feel uncomfortable, do you? He finally asked, his voice gruff but laced with concern. No, Ren reassured him. It was just a minor wound, and they healed it right there. Juichi nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. That's good. But even as he said it, Ren could tell his father still wasn't at ease. Ren tried to assure Juichi that he was fine, but Juichi simply shook his head and let out a sigh. Don't try to console me, brat. I'm not so weak that I need a kid's assurance, he said, rubbing Ren's head. I was ready for the day you might come home injured the moment you started training. But his voice softened slightly. It's a parent's duty to worry about their kid. You wouldn't understand that now. Ren didn't argue. He could see the concern in his father's eyes, and even though Juichi was trying to brush it off, Ren could tell that seeing him injured, even if it was just a minor wound, had affected him more than he let on. Suddenly, Juichi's tone shifted abruptly, snapping Ren out of his thoughts. Anyway, you did good today. There will probably be a tie for first place. If this were before, Itachi would have taken first place alone. Ren's brows furrowed slightly. Why would it be different now? Juichi shook his head. Don't worry about it. You just need to know that you'll get your weapon. I'll make sure the quality is good enough, so rest easy. Just let Utakata know to meet me when he asks you for your reward. Ren nodded, feeling satisfied about his upcoming reward, but a lingering question remained in his mind. You know, he started, during my fight with Itachi, Utakata-sensei and an Uchiha interfered before we could finish. Do you know why? Juichi didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the question back on him. What do you think? Ren rubbed his chin, thinking deeply. After a while, he answered hesitantly, because we had already shown enough? Juichi nodded approvingly. Precisely. What you two showed today was already far beyond the strength of an average genin. And you're only in your first year. If either of you had gone further, you would have been pushed for early graduation right now. Juichi continued, the Uchiha observing your fight was likely acting on the patriarch's orders. They would want to show off their clan heir's genius, but not to the extent where he would be forced to graduate early. The clan still wants him to grow in the academy. As for Utakata, he must have stepped in the moment he saw the Uchiha interfere and understood their reasoning. Ren absorbed the information carefully. So they both had the same goal, to stop the fight before it escalated too much. Exactly, Juichi confirmed. It made sense. Itachi was valuable to the Uchiha, and Ren was attracting too much attention. If they had gone any further, the academy might have pushed for their early graduation, something neither side wanted right now. Just as Ren was processing all of this, Juichi reached into his vest pocket and pulled out 2 scrolls, tossing them to Ren with a small smirk. Here. This is my reward for you since you did so well. Ren caught the scrolls and quickly scanned them. Wind style, Great Breakthrough. Earth style, Earth Dragon Blast. His eyes lit up with excitement. C-rank jutsus. Finally, some real offensive power. He exclaimed, looking at his father with gratitude. Thanks, Dad. Juichi nodded with a smile and flickered out, leaving Ren alone in the basement. Ren looked at the 2 scrolls in his hands, his excitement barely contained. These were C-rank offensive ninjutsu, exactly what he needed to start expanding his combat potential. Up until now, most of his jutsus had been support-based, useful for enhancing his fighting style, but lacking real firepower. With these, my arsenal won't just be about speed and tricks anymore. I'll finally have some solid offensive jutsu. He carefully unrolled the scrolls, skimming through their contents. The first was Wind Style, Great Breakthrough, a well-known wind technique that allowed the user to generate a massive gust of wind capable of blasting away obstacles, enemies, and even projectiles. The second was Earth Style, Earth Dragon Blast, a technique that shaped mud into a dragon's head, which could spit out powerful mud projectiles at high speed. Ren clenched his fist in determination. Ren was very excited, so he immediately opened the scroll for the Great Breakthrough Jutsu and carefully read through its details. The technique itself was simple but powerful. The user breathes wind from their mouth, creating a strong gust capable of blowing away whatever is in front of them. The strength of the wind depended entirely on the user's skill and chakra control. The hand seals for the jutsu were, Tiger Rock Star Rabbit Snake. Ran steadied himself and performed the hand seals one by one. As he reached the final seal, he took a deep breath and exhaled, channeling his chakra through his lungs. A powerful gust of wind surged forward, rushing 50 meters ahead before gradually fading. The jutsu lasted for 5 seconds and had consumed more than a tenth of his chakra. Unlike the gentler wind-based techniques he had practiced before, this jutsu had aggressive winds that carried real destructive force. It was his first truly offensive wind-style jutsu, and it exceeded his expectations. Ren wanted to keep practicing, but he knew rest was important too, so he decided to call it a night. He went to his room, laid down on his bed, and started thinking. That was when he remembered he hadn't yet claimed his system rewards from his past accomplishments. Opening the system screen, he was surprised to find not 2, but 4 pending rewards. System rewards: congratulations for learning your first D-rank jutsu, Body Flicker Jutsu, reward, 2 Chunin level points. Congratulations for learning your first B-rank jutsu, Shadow Clone Jutsu, reward, 2 mastery points. 1 point increases mastery by 10% before advanced level. Congratulations for becoming the rival of young Itachi Uchiha, reward, minor Ganjutsu resistance, resistant to Ganjutsu below A rank. Congratulations for learning your first C-rank jutsu, Great Breakthrough, reward, 5 Chunin level points. Ren was stunned by the rewards. The Chunin level points were expected, but the mastery points were something he had never received before. From the explanation, they could only be used before a mastery reached advanced level, 75%. His current mastery panel was as follows: Chakra Control -60%, Intermediate, Fast Fist Taijutsu -58%, Intermediate, Shuriken Jutsu -74%, Intermediate, Shadow Clone Mastery -48%, Beginner, Wind Style Mastery -56%, Intermediate, Earth Style Mastery -46%, Beginner. Ren thought carefully about where to invest his mastery points. His chakra control had been progressing the slowest, so he decided to save the points. Once it reached 64%, he could use a mastery point to push it straight to 74%, just before the advanced level cap. For the other point, he decided to save it for Shadow Clone Mastery, which was progressing steadily on its own for now. His reward for becoming Itachi's rival also surprised him. He had always known that interacting with canon characters would be beneficial, which was why he never backed down from fighting Itachi. But only today did he receive a system reward for it, meaning Itachi had finally acknowledged him as a rival. And the reward itself was incredibly valuable: minor Ganjutsu resistance. Ren wasn't interested in Ganjutsu, but he knew its dangers. Having a natural resistance to any Ganjutsu below A rank would be invaluable in the future. Now, it was time to distribute his points. Over the past 6 months, he hadn't been receiving any points, but now, he had 7 available. His main focus had always been vitality and chakra, since increasing vitality also helped grow chakra reserves naturally. System, add 6 points to vitality, Ren instructed. A system notification rang out, vitality 32, chakra 28, as expected. Vitality's increase had also boosted his chakra. With 1 remaining point, he decided to invest it directly into chakra, raising it to chakra 29. Satisfied with his gains, Ren finally closed his eyes and drifted off into peaceful sleep. Chapter 28. Secrets I Have Held in My Heart. In the academy classroom, students were engaged in discussions within their usual groups. Now that 6 months had passed, most of them had found their circles and stuck close with those they connected with the most. Only a few exceptions, like Hitachi, remained alone, though even he wasn't completely spared from the enthusiasm of the girls, who would constantly surround him to try and strike up a conversation. They had attempted the same with Ren at first, but he had politely asked them not to disturb him. Fortunately, none of the girls were particularly obsessed with him, so they eventually gave up and focused all their attention on Hitachi instead. As a result, Ren was spared from the jealousy and resentment of the other boys, who secretly wished the girls would pay attention to them instead. Like always, Uekata entered the classroom at the exact time, his expression as neutral as ever. Without wasting a single second, he began the lesson, moving through the subjects efficiently and precisely. The day passed just like any other academy day, and although the students remained focused, many of them had one lingering thought: would they be receiving any rewards today? For those who knew they had performed poorly, there was a sense of unease, but when nothing was announced throughout the lessons, some of them felt mild relief, thinking they had escaped punishment. When the final class ended, Uekata finally addressed them. His voice, as always, was calm and direct. "I will be in the staff room. Form a line and enter one by one." Without saying anything further, he flickered out of the room, leaving the students to quickly organize themselves. As Ren was second to last in line, he had plenty of time to observe the reactions of his classmates as they exited the staff room. Some emerged beaming with joy, clearly pleased with their rewards, while others looked disappointed, angry, or even frustrated, likely having not received what they wanted. A few students who had worried about punishments looked relieved, realizing their fears were unfounded. When Eiji finally came out, he was grinning ear to ear, looking extremely pleased with himself. Ren, curious, asked, "How much did you get?" Eiji's grin widened, and he said proudly, "He said 15, but I haggled for 20. Ren couldn't help but nod slightly. Eiji's ability to bargain was impressive. Considering that a normal academy student received around 2,000 ryo per month as a village subsidy, getting 20,000 ryo in one go was practically an entire year's allowance in a single day. "Good for you," Ren replied casually. Money didn't really concern him, his father was already taking care of those matters for now. Finally, it was Ren's turn. Entering the staff room, he saw Uekata seated behind a desk, a clipper and a stack of documents in front of him. The Jonin glanced up as Ren entered and, without any preamble, asked in his usual neutral tone, "You have the option to select your reward, but be reasonable." Ren nodded and stepped forward, placing a rolled-up scroll on the desk. "I want this weapon," he said. Uekata picked up the scroll and unrolled it, his sharp eyes scanning the details. He studied the design carefully, then gave a small nod. "I estimate it will take about a week, maybe less. I will inform you when it's ready." Ren nodded in understanding. Just as he was about to leave, he remembered his father's message. "My father asked me to tell you that he wants to meet you after you receive the scroll," he added. Uekata's expression didn't change, but his eyes lingered on Ren for a moment before he finally nodded. "All right. You may go." Ren gave a short bow and exited the room, heading off to begin his evening training. Night had fallen over Hidden Leaf Village, but the village was alive with activity. The streets were bustling with people shopping, vendors calling out their wares, and families enjoying the cool evening air. At Akiraku Ramen, the soft glow of lanterns illuminated the humble stand. The fabric curtains at the entrance parted as a one-armed man stepped inside, a bottle of sake in his hand. His eyes scanned the small space until they landed on a black-haired man with a ponytail sitting at the counter. With a casual saunter, he made his way over and took the seat beside him. "It's been a while," Juichi said, opening the bottle of sake with practiced ease. "Indeed, it has," Uekata replied evenly. Just then, Tuki emerged from behind the counter, a knowing smile forming on his face as he took in the sight before him. "I don't remember the last time I saw you two together," he mused, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "It's nice to see you both." Juichi lifted his cup in a small salute. "Good to see you too, Tuki-san." Uekata merely nodded in acknowledgement. "I'll get your order," Tuki said, disappearing into the kitchen to prepare their usual. Juichi wasted no time, pouring himself a cup and downing it in one go. By the time their ramen arrived, He was already on his third glass. "You shouldn't drink so much," Yuikata remarked, picking up his chopsticks and breaking them apart. Juichi waved him off with a lazy flick of his wrist. "Ah, I don't get many chances to drink like this anymore. I've got a kid to care for." Yuikata took a sip of his broth before replying. "He's good, your kid." Juichi smirked, pride evident in his expression. "Of course he is. After all, he's my son." Yuikata, however, simply shook his head. "The boy is an exact copy of Sayaka, Ren's mother, but his talent is like his." He paused meaningfully before continuing, "I doubt anyone would believe he's yours." Juichi, caught mid-drink, choked on his steak and coughed violently, pointing a shaky finger at Yuikata. "You, stop making a scene and eat your food," Yuikata cut in, eyeing him with mild disdain. Juichi grumbled under his breath but eventually turned his attention to his ramen, glaring at Yuikata as he ate. After a few moments of silence, Yuikata spoke again. "You wanted to see me? About the weapon?" Juichi nodded. "Take it to the old man. Tell him to make it good as compensation for not letting me see the boy." His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of bitterness beneath the words. Yuikata regarded him carefully. "Didn't let you meet him either, did he?" Juichi snorted, his irritation clear. "It was that one-eyed bastard who refused, and the old man allowed it." Yuikata didn't seem surprised. He simply nodded, as if he had already expected this outcome. As they finished their meal, Juichi stood up first, tossing a few coins onto the counter. Just as he was about to leave, Yuikata spoke again. "Any idea where Sensei is?" Juichi paused for a moment before answering. "Out chasing the traitorous snake." With that, he pushed aside the curtains and disappeared into the night, leaving Yuikata alone at the counter, deep in thought. Location Hokage office. Even though it was late at night, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, was still working, his desk cluttered with scrolls and documents. The dim glow of the lantern cast long shadows in the office as his brush moved rhythmically across the paper. A knock at the door broke the silence, but without pausing or looking up, Hiruzen simply said, "Enter." Yuikata Ito stepped inside, closing the door behind him before walking up to the desk. He stood silently, waiting for permission to speak. Several moments passed before Hiruzen finished signing the document in front of him, setting his brush aside with a quiet sigh. Looking up, he acknowledged the Jonin before him with a nod. "You're here." Yuikata nodded back. "Have you documented the students' choices?" Hiruzen asked. Without a word, Yuikata handed him a scroll containing the records of the rewards distributed and the choices made by the top-performing students. Hiruzen unrolled the scroll and scanned through it, his expression unreadable. There were no particular reactions as he read, his eyes calmly absorbing the details. "Good," he finally said, rolling it back up. "Handle it as you see fit." Yuikata nodded and reached into his vest, pulling out another scroll and placing it on the desk. "Design for Ren Takahashi's weapon of choice," he stated. Hiruzen took the scroll and unfurled it, studying the intricate design carefully. The weapon was well thought out, functional, adaptable, and clearly designed to complement Ren's fighting style. His eyes lingered on the details for a moment before Yuikata spoke again. Juichi said the weapon should be made well, as compensation for not letting him see the boy. At these words, Hiruzen exhaled a quiet, weary sigh. He slowly closed the scroll and placed it in one of the drawers of his desk, locking it with a soft click. "You were always the rational one out of the three," he said, looking at Yuikata with measured eyes. "So you must understand why I'm doing this." Yuikata nodded slightly, his face betraying nothing. "I know. He knows it too. He just doesn't like it. And I don't think Sensei would like it either." Hiruzen's grip tightened slightly on his pipe as he took a slow drag, exhaling a thin stream of smoke into the air. "I wish I could do something," he admitted, his gaze drifting to the window overlooking the village. "But sometimes, even the greatest have no choice but to take a step back." Silence settled over the room as the two men stood there, each lost in their own thoughts, the quiet hum of Hidden Leaf Village's night serving as the only witness to their conversation. Chapter 29, a new source for rewards. As a new dawn graced Hidden Leaf Village, the village slowly came to life. The streets filled with merchants opening their stalls, shopkeepers preparing for the day's work, and shinobi heading out for their missions. The faint morning mist still clung to the rooftops, where the occasional blur of movement betrayed the presence of Hidden Leaf Village's protectors, leaping between the buildings. Children, always eager for excitement, chased after the passing shadows, their laughter ringing through the air as they tried in vain to catch up. On one of the taller rooftops, two blurs raced across the tiles, one clad in deep blue, the other in forest green, Ren and Eiji, weaving effortlessly through the rooftops. Parkour was second nature to shinobi, a skill so ingrained that few ever consciously thought about it. Moving across the village like this felt freeing, a moment of exhilaration unburdened by responsibility. Today, the academy was closed, a day of remembrance for those who had fallen during the Ninetales attack. Though the tragedy had left deep scars on Hidden Leaf Village, life continued, as it always did. It had been 3 months since the academy's first major test. Ren had received his weapon within the promised week, and its quality had exceeded his expectations. When he showed it to Juichi, his father had inspected it with a nod of approval, informing him that the claws were partially made of chakra metal, allowing seamless chakra flow through the blades. The gloves were crafted from layered fabric used in Jonin uniforms, ensuring they wouldn't tear easily. The design was perfect. It fit Ren's hands now but could be adjusted as he grew. From that moment on, Ren trained relentlessly to master the weapon. Using the claws in combat felt different from fighting barehanded, and incorporating ninjutsu while wielding them was an entirely new challenge. He couldn't afford to make mistakes in real combat, so he turned to the one person who could push him beyond his limits: his father. For weeks, his father became his primary training partner. They clashed again and again, Ren testing his growing speed, precision, and adaptability. Since the claws were far too dangerous for normal spars at the academy, he had no choice but to learn through battles with his father, who never held back. Now, after months of effort, the weapon felt like an extension of his body. But even then, there was always room for improvement. As Ren and Eiji continued weaving through the rooftops, they occasionally threw small stones at each other, trying to knock the other off balance. Their light-hearted game continued as they neared the training ground area, where the rooftops gave way to tall trees and open spaces. The village's structured buildings slowly faded, replaced by nature's embrace. In one of the more secluded areas, Ren spotted Itachi Uchiha practicing shuriken jutsu. The wooden targets around him were already filled with kunai, arranged in near-perfect patterns. Since their fight during the academy exam, Ren and Itachi had started acknowledging each other with simple greetings, though their interactions rarely extended beyond that. They weren't exactly friends, but there was a mutual respect between them, the recognition of two individuals who stood at the top of their generation. Ren, without hesitation, leaped down from the tree he was perched on. Caught off guard by the sudden movement, Itachi instinctively flicked a kunai in his direction, which Ren dodged effortlessly. "Hey, Itachi," Ren greeted, unfazed. Eiji followed suit, landing beside him with a dramatic wave. "Hey," he drawled, his usual carefree grin in place. Seeing that it was them, Itachi relaxed slightly and greeted them politely. "Hello, Ren-san." "Hello, Eiji-san." Ren sighed internally. He had long since given up trying to get Itachi to drop the san. It was just part of how Itachi carried himself. Eiji, glancing at the numerous kunai embedded into the distant target boards, let out a low whistle. "You're still training shuriken jutsu? But you're already the best in the class, hell, even in the entire academy. I doubt anyone could match you." Ren agreed silently. His own mastery of shuriken jutsu was at 79%, his first mastery to reach advanced level. Yet, even with that, Itachi's technique remained superior. The difference wasn't huge, but it was enough for Ren to acknowledge that Itachi was better. "I enjoy kunai throwing. It helps me relax," Itachi answered simply. Then, after a short pause, he asked, "Were you two training?" "Yeah, we were heading to the training grounds," Ren answered. Itachi tilted his head slightly. "You can train here if you don't mind training alongside me." "Sure, I don't mind." "What about you, thief?" Ren asked, nudging Eiji. Eiji shrugged. "No problem. Free training ground is a free training ground." With that, the three of them each chose a separate area and began their respective training, ensuring they wouldn't interfere with one another. As Ren settled into his spot, his mind drifted. "It's already been a whole year since I came into this world." He sighed, remembering the chaos of the Ninetales attack, the uncertainty of waking up in a world he had only known through a screen, and the intense training that had shaped him since then. Today was his 7th birthday. This morning, Juichi had given him a special gift, one that marked a new phase in his training. His father had handed him a small storage seal along with a set of training weights and explained, "This is a first-level training seal. Its maximum weight goes up to 100 kilograms. Start at 50 kilograms and increase it when you see fit, but deactivate the seal when you sleep. Never keep the seal activated during a fight, it could become a handicap otherwise." Juichi had then handed him a separate set of weights for his legs, a band with multiple slots to hold removable weights. "Start with 10 kilograms on each leg. It'll help you develop more speed over time." Now, Ren was training with those exact weights. 50 kilograms on his body and an extra 20 on his legs. The added burden had slowed his movements at first, but after adjusting through a morning of Parker with Eiji, his body was adapting. His strength was now at 28 and his agility at 33, but the rate of improvement had slowed significantly. Normal training alone wasn't enough anymore. That was why Juichi had allowed him to begin weighted training. At the same time, His shadow clones continued their ninjutsu training in the basement. He could now create 2 clones, and thanks to his shadow clone mastery reaching 56%, they lasted much longer than before. With everything in place, Ren took a deep breath. It was time to push his limits even further. As the hours passed, the 3 continued their training, pushing their limits with each round. They had engaged in brief sparring sessions as well, and compared to before, the difference in strength was slowly closing in. Itachi was at level 35, Ren had reached level 29, and Eiji was now level 20. Though Eiji lacked any inherent advantage like a Kekkei Genkai or special lineage, his sheer determination and adaptability kept him from falling too far behind. He would eventually catch up if their growth slowed, though Itachi's impending Sharingan awakening would inevitably give him a sharp boost in power. Ren, on the other hand, could only rely on his training and sporadic system rewards until he found a consistent source of points. Just as he was thinking about this, a sudden prickling sensation crawled up his spine, the unmistakable feeling of danger. His body moved on instinct, his chakra surging as he immediately used hiding like a mole jutsu, a C-rank earth jutsu his father had given him. Diving underground, he moved swiftly through the soil, using his senses to search for the attacker. But just as he was about to surface, the ground above him shifted violently. Large chunks of earth shot up in blocks, disrupting his movement and restricting his options. Ren barely had time to react before the ground beneath him exploded outward, forcing him to flicker away. He barely landed when a fist came flying toward him. He didn't even have time to see the attacker. Pure instinct took over. His left arm shot up, absorbing the brunt of the punch while his right hand flew into the half-ram seal. Channeling his wind chakra, he exhaled sharply, unleashing a powerful gust of wind at the unknown assailant. But the attacker had already vanished. The air around him stilled, but Ren's muscles remained tense, his body preparing for another attack. At that moment, Itachi and Eiji landed beside him, both immediately shifting into combat-ready stances. Eiji, already gripping a kunai, was about to launch himself forward when Itachi's voice rang out, calm but firm. "Shizue-san, stop. What are you doing?" Ren's gaze snapped toward the direction Itachi was facing. Standing there, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly, was none other than Shizue Uchiha, the famed Shizue of the body flicker. "Don't worry, Itachi," Shizue said, his voice casual but laced with amusement. "I just wanted to see the person who can fight you to a tie every match." He turned his attention fully to Ren, his eyes glimmering with curiosity. "Hey, my name is Shizue Uchiha. Sorry for attacking you out of nowhere, but I gotta say you were very good." Ren, still catching his breath, studied Shizue carefully. The man was young, maybe just a few years older than them, yet his presence was overwhelming. His movements had been flawless, his speed incomprehensible. Even though Ren had trained rigorously for a year, Shizue's casual attack had almost overwhelmed him. The gap between them was massive. But rather than feeling discouraged, Ren felt excitement bubbling inside him. This was an opportunity. Shizue was known for his insane speed, body flicker mastery, and battlefield prowess, but most importantly he was an important canon character who had shaped Itachi. The rewards for interacting with him would be definitely good. "You're insane, you know that?" Ren said, shaking his head with a small grin. "You attacked without warning. I didn't even get a proper look at you before dodging." Shizue chuckled, his expression turning more playful. "That's the whole point of an ambush, isn't it?" Eiji, still looking somewhat suspicious, finally lowered his kunai. "You almost gave us a heart attack, man. I thought we were actually under attack." "Huh, sorry about that," Shizue said, waving him off before turning back to Ren. "You've got great instincts. Most people in your situation would have been hit before they even realized what was happening." Ren didn't let the compliment get to his head. Instead, he took a step forward, meeting Shizue's gaze directly. "If you're so curious about my skills, why don't we take it a step further?" he challenged, tilting his head. "How about a proper fight? No ambush this time." Shizue raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. Itachi remained silent, his gaze flickering between the two, while Eiji let out a short laugh. "You're either brave or suicidal, Speedo." Shizue smirked, cracking his knuckles. "A fight, huh? Alright. Let's see what you've got." Ren knew this was going to be on a completely different level. Chapter 30, Flicker Master in the action. Shizue and Ren stood facing each other, the tension in the air rising as the two prepared for their clash. Eiji and Itachi had moved back, giving them space to fight, their eyes keenly observing the battle about to unfold. Ren deactivated his training seal, feeling the familiar lightness in his body as the restrictions on his strength and agility were lifted. He then removed his leg weights, handing them to Eiji, who whistled at their weight but said nothing. Shizue stood relaxed, his arms hanging loosely at his sides, but Ren could feel the overwhelming pressure radiating from him. He wasn't even trying, yet Ren already knew he was completely outclassed. "Alright," Shizue said, his usual playful smirk in place. "Come at me with everything you've got. Don't worry about my safety." Ren nodded, though he couldn't help but recall his father saying the exact same words before their spars. Juichi had the strength to back up that claim, and so did Shizue, perhaps even more so. Shizue had awakened his Mengekyo Sharingan at just 7 years old, an achievement that put him far above most shinobi in the village. Ren tightened the gloves on his hands, feeling the smooth chakra metal at his fingertips. No one had seen his weapon before, and he planned to keep it hidden until the right moment. Shizue bent down and picked up a small stone. Without a word, he flicked it into the air. They both watched it rise, then fall. The moment it touched the ground, Shizue vanished. Ren barely had time to react before a fist was flying toward his face. His instincts screamed at him, and he jerked backward at the last second, narrowly avoiding the blurring strike. But Shizue didn't stop. He moved like a storm, relentless and unpredictable, his speed almost untraceable. His fists and feet came from all angles, jabs, kicks, palm strikes faster than Ren could count. Ren was forced on the defensive, dodging as best he could, but his reactions were barely keeping up. The few times he tried to counterattack, Shizue would effortlessly sidestep or redirect his strikes, almost as if he could see them coming. Body flicker. Ren disappeared in a burst of speed, flickering behind Shizue for a sneak attack. Shizue was already gone. A sharp kick slammed into Ren's ribs before he even finished turning, sending him skidding across the ground. He barely caught himself, breathing hard. He is too fast, Ren realized, his mind racing. If I keep fighting in pure taijutsu, I won't even touch him. Ren gritted his teeth. He still had one more trick. Ninjutsu. Wind style, gale palm. Instead of aiming at Shizue, Ren thrust both hands behind him, releasing a powerful burst of wind. The effect was immediate. Like a rocket, Ren shot forward, his speed multiplying. He activated body flicker on top of it, pushing his limits. His already blinding speed soared, making him almost impossible to track. He moved in a blur, circling Shizue, who remained still, calmly watching. 2, 3, 4 afterimages formed. Ren had spent weeks refining this technique while training with his father. He knew his speed could overwhelm the human eye, making his clones appear real. Then he struck. All 5 Rens lunged at Shizue from different directions. The real Ren attacked from the left, fists clenched, the force behind his speed enough to break bones. At the last second clang, a metallic ring echoed as Shizue's kunai blocked Ren's weapon. Ren's eyes widened. His claws had been revealed in the attack, extended just before impact for a final surprise, but Shizue had reacted instantly. Ren looked up and froze. Blood-red eyes stared back at him. The 2 spinning tomoe of the Sharingan locked onto his gaze, and for a brief moment, his vision blurred. A wave of dizziness washed over him, but just as quickly as it came, it vanished. Shizue's eyes narrowed slightly in surprise. Ren let out a slow breath. Ganjutsu resistance. It worked. His reward from the system had saved him. If Shizue had used a higher-level Ganjutsu, it might not have worked, but since this one was below A rank, Ren had managed to break free before it took hold. There was a beat of silence. Then Ren let out a sigh and lowered his stance. I lost. Shizue blinked. Then, he chuckled. You're pretty sharp. Shizue glanced at Ren before shifting his gaze briefly to Itachi, whose fists were clenched at his sides. Shizue knew that, at this moment, Itachi wouldn't have been able to react to the speed Ren had shown not before awakening his Sharingan. He turned his attention back to Ren, who had sat down on the ground, catching his breath. I could have used some other tricks, Ren admitted, exhaling slowly, but they wouldn't have worked either. Shizue chuckled, crossing his arms. Don't sell yourself short. Even some Takebutsu Jonin wouldn't have been able to react to that last attack. You're doing great, but you can push your speed even further if you improve your chakra control, especially with the body flicker. Practice it hard. Ren absorbed the advice silently, already making a note to focus on fine-tuning his chakra flow efficiency during flickers. Shizue then turned to Itachi and said, Come on, Itachi, Mikoto-san was calling you. Itachi hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. He turned toward Ren and Eiji, who had come over to hand Ren his weights back. Goodbye, Ren-san. Eiji-san. See you at the academy, Itachi said with his usual calm politeness. Ren nodded, while Eiji gave a lazy wave. Shizue gave them one last glance before flickering away, Itachi following closely behind. For a brief moment, silence filled the training ground. Then, Eiji let out a deep breath and muttered, Man, you're getting even faster. I couldn't even catch a glimpse of you that time. His usual smirk returned as he bumped Ren's shoulder. But don't let it get to your head. I'll catch up soon. I won't be latching onto you forever. Ren blinked, surprised. Then, he smiled. Then you better work hard, thief, Ren said, raising his fist. Because I'm not stopping anytime soon. AG smirked, bumping his fist against Ren's. When Ren returned home, he was met with an unexpected sight. Happy birthday. Juechi's voice boomed through the house as he held up a cake with a somewhat triumphant look. Ren blinked, completely caught off guard. Then, a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. Thanks, Dad. They sat together, eating the cake as Ren recounted the events of his day. He told Juechi about sparring with Shishui, the way his speed had increased using his modified Gale Palm technique, and how Shishui had still managed to counter him effortlessly. Juechi listened quietly, nodding at certain points, before he finally sighed and leaned back. It's fine if you spend time with them, but don't get too close to the Uchiha for now. Ren stopped mid-bite. Why? Juechi clicked his tongue. You're sharp, kid. You already know the answer, don't you? Ren frowned. He had already sensed the slow isolation of the Uchiha clan from the rest of the village. He had noticed the subtle way people avoided talking about them, how even Itachi despite his talents wasn't being praised nearly as much as he should have been. The village was distancing itself, slowly but surely. It's starting, isn't it? Ren thought. He wanted to ask for some details but stopped himself. For a brief moment, the air between them grew heavy. Then, as if trying to lighten the mood, Juechi pulled out a familiar-looking scroll and tossed it to Ren. Here. Your birthday present. Ren caught the scroll, already grinning. Another jutsu? Juechi smirked. What else would I get a battle maniac like you? Ren unrolled the scroll and read the title, Earth Style, Bottomless Swamp. A good technique for immobilizing multiple opponents at once, Juechi explained. Takes a bit of chakra, though, so don't spam it unless you want to pass out. Ren nodded eagerly, already looking forward to trying it out. Thanks, Dad. Juechi waved him off, standing up. Go get some rest. You can break the ground later. Ren chuckled but nodded. Good night. Once in his room, Ren sat on his bed and opened his system panel. As expected, a notification was waiting for him. Congratulations, host, for getting the acknowledgement of Shishui Uchiha. Rewards, Minor Enhanced Reflexes, Major Enhanced Reflexes, Ganjutsu Resistance, B rank, Ganjutsu Resistance, A rank. Ren's eyes widened as he read the rewards. Major Enhanced Reflexes? He clenched his fists, already excited to test the improvement. His reflexes were already a step above normal shinobi, but now they would be on another level. And the Ganjutsu Resistance upgrade. That means even a fully matured 3 Tomoe Sharingan won't work on me. He let out a low whistle. This is insane. For the first time since arriving in this world, Ren felt like he was truly growing into something powerful. The system, his training, his experiences, everything was pushing him further. And he still had so much more to achieve. Smiling to himself, Ren closed his eyes and fell asleep, excited for what came next. Chapter 31, Dumbledore of the Ninja World. It was just another normal day in Ren's life as he returned to the academy after the break. As he walked through the hallway, he suddenly saw an unusual sight, Itachi being paraded through the corridor by 3 boys. The 3 kids had their heads held high, clearing the path ahead of them as if they were the guards of a royal procession. They loudly declared Itachi as their boss, ensuring that no one stood in his way. The only one who didn't seem pleased with the situation was Itachi himself. With his head lowered slightly and a dark shadow lingering around him, he silently accepted his fate. When Itachi raised his head, his eyes locked onto Ren's, glimmering with an unspoken plea, perhaps for help or understanding. But before any words could be exchanged, Ren simply turned around and walked in another direction. Itachi stared at Ren's retreating back for a moment before sighing and continuing his march with his new followers. I guess this means his use of the Shadow Clone Jutsu is about to be discovered, Ren thought as he left the scene. Figures. The first year is almost over, so it's about time they accept his level is way beyond others. Looks like he'll be graduating soon. And, as expected, 2 days later, the news spread throughout the academy. Itachi Uchiha had been promoted directly to the 6th year class, set to graduate early. Itachi's sudden promotion to the graduation class was the main topic of discussion throughout the village. Everyone was talking about the Uchiha prodigy, praising his genius and potential. Even at the academy, the students couldn't stop discussing it. Ren, however, remained unaffected. He had briefly considered applying for graduation as well, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized it would do him no good. Graduating early would mean being assigned to a Genin team, following mission schedules, and significantly reducing his available training time. Right now, his rapid growth was largely due to the flexibility of his routine. If he became a Genin too early, that flexibility would disappear. Besides, His strength wasn't at a level where he would gain anything from leaving the academy just yet. If I can keep training freely, I'll be stronger than most chunin by the time I graduate normally. There's no reason to rush. Still, seeing Itachi rise so quickly lit a fire inside Ren. He had no interest in competing with him, but it was still a reminder that time never stopped moving. If he wanted to be strong enough to survive the dangers of this world, he had to keep pushing forward. So while the rest of the academy was caught up in the buzz of Itachi's early graduation, Ren simply continued his usual training. The graduation exam was approaching, but Ren didn't let it disrupt his routine. Even if it were the actual graduation exam, he wouldn't have any trouble passing, so the first-year exams posed no real challenge to him. He continued his usual training, refining his techniques and strengthening his body without any concern for the upcoming tests. On the day of the exam, Utakata entered the classroom and announced, "Good morning. Today, everything you have learned over the past year will be tested. The first part will be the written exam, followed by the leaf-holding test, then the shuriken jutsu test, and lastly, the combat test. This time, you will draw lots to determine your opponent, making it a tournament-style competition. The winners will advance, and your final placement combined with the results of the other tests will determine your overall class ranking. The bottom 5 will be demoted from the elite class." With Itachi already moved to the 6th year, there was no one left in the class who could challenge Ren for the top spot. He easily secured first place in all the exams, dominating each test without much effort. The final match for first place was against Eiji, who had recently stepped into the Chunin level at level 21. Despite his growth, Eiji still wasn't a match for Ren, who overpowered him without much difficulty. With this, Ren stood as the undisputed top student of the first-year elite class. Since the exam was over and the first year of the academy had officially concluded, Ren decided to take the rest of the day off to relax. He dispelled the 2 shadow clones that had been working on jutsu training in the basement, freeing himself from any responsibilities for the day. With no particular destination in mind, he wandered around Hidden Leaf Village, letting his feet carry him wherever they pleased. Eventually, he found himself at the Hokage Monument, climbing up to sit atop the head of the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju. Tobirama had always been Ren's favorite Hokage, not just for his legendary power, but for his visionary leadership. He was the one who had pioneered Hidden Leaf Village's development, laying the foundation that allowed Hiruzen to make it the strongest village of its time. Without him, many of the systems that held the village together wouldn't even exist. As the sun began its descent, casting a warm orange red glow over the entire village, Ren opened his system panel to check the rewards for securing first place in the academy exams. System reward, 5 Chunin level points. Ren raised an eyebrow. The reward was less than he had expected, but in hindsight, it made sense. His strength had already surpassed many Chunin level shinobi, so excelling in a first-year academy exam wasn't exactly groundbreaking. Without hesitation, he allocated 3 points to vitality and 2 to chakra. Previously, every 2 points in vitality had increased his chakra by 1, but now, it took 3 points. Eventually, when his physical energy fully caught up to his mental energy, he knew that this additional chakra gain would stop entirely. Satisfied with his progress, he opened his full system panel to assess his growth. Status panel, name, Ren Takahashi, level, 32, attribute, strength, 32, agility, 36, intelligence, 34, vitality, 39, chakra, 37, talents, improved chakra control, enhanced reflexes, Ganjutsu resistance, A rank, mastery panel, chakra control, 64%, fast fist taijutsu, 70%, shuriken jutsu, 81%, shadow clone mastery, 60%, wind style mastery, 63%, earth style mastery, 60%, 2 available points. Ren carefully examined his stats. In just 1 year, he had come a long way. All his attributes were above 30, well into early Chunin level. With his increased observation ability, he could now see levels up to 52. From his analysis, he determined that Takebutsu Jonin ranged from level 40 to 50 and Jonin were above level 50. He set a goal for himself before graduating from the academy next year. He wanted his agility to reach Takebutsu Jonin levels. Speed was his greatest strength, and pushing it to its limits would solidify his advantage. As for mastery, chakra control remained the hardest to improve. Since he had 2 mastery points, he planned to use 1 on chakra control when it reached 64%, instantly boosting it to 74%. This would save him months of tedious training. The second point would be reserved for shadow clone mastery, which was already progressing steadily at 60%. The elemental masteries, wind and earth, were also increasing steadily. This was thanks to his dedicated clones working on them daily. One clone focused entirely on wind techniques, while the other worked on earth techniques. Without the system, absorbing memories from 2 clones every day would have overwhelmed his brain, but the system processed them seamlessly, converting them directly into mastery percentage. As Ren was closing his system panel, a sudden chill ran down his spine. His instincts screamed at him danger. He shot up to his feet in an instant, heart pounding, muscles tensed. He had unknowingly moved so close to the edge of the second Hokage's head that one wrong step could send him plummeting down. Just as he was about to jump down and escape, a deep voice spoke behind him. "Ho ho! Calm down, my boy. Admiring the village, are you?" Ren whirled around, his body still on high alert. But the moment his eyes landed on the figure before him, his heartbeat slowed. Standing there, pipe in hand, clad in his ceremonial robes, was none other than the third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi. Ren immediately straightened and bowed respectfully. "Lord Hokage." Hiruzen Sarutobi stood behind him, his posture relaxed yet commanding. The setting sun bathed the Hokage monument in a warm glow, casting long shadows that danced over Hidden Leaf Village. Ren steadied his breath, forcing his heart rate to calm after the initial shock of sensing the Hokage's presence. It was the first time he had ever been caught so off guard, and it made him realize just how vast the gap was between him and true powerhouses like the third. The old man chuckled lightly, his eyes kind but sharp, filled with decades of wisdom and experience. "No need to be so tense, Ren. I was simply taking a walk and happened to spot you here," Hiruzen said, stepping forward to stand beside him. "The view from here is something, isn't it?" Ren turned back toward the village, looking down at the streets bustling with life. "Yes, Lord Hokage," he replied, his tone respectful but steady. "It's a good place to think." Hiruzen hummed in agreement, gazing out over the village he had protected for so long. The second Hokage, Tobi Ramasenju. I always wondered what he would think if he could see the village today. He built the foundations of what we have now, but I believe even he wouldn't have predicted everything that has come to pass. He took a slow drag from his pipe, exhaling a thin stream of smoke that curled into the air. "Tell me, Ren, what do you see when you look at Hidden Leaf Village from up here?" Ren glanced at the third, wondering why he was asking such a question. Was this a test? A casual conversation? Regardless, he answered truthfully. "I see the strongest village in the world, but one that's also recovering. Rebuilding after everything that happened." Hiruzen's eyes flickered with something unreadable before he let out a soft chuckle. "Perceptive. Juichi has raised a smart one." Ren didn't respond, but he listened carefully. This was a rare opportunity to hear the thoughts of one of the most powerful figures in the village. After a moment, the third Hokage turned to him. "You're talented, Ren. Stronger than most your age." His gaze sharpened, not unkind but definitely probing. "What do you plan to do with that strength?" Ren didn't hesitate. "To become stronger. And to protect what's mine." The Hokage smiled, though there was a weight behind it. "Good. But strength alone is never enough. Power without wisdom leads only to destruction. Keep that in mind as you grow." Ren nodded, taking the words to heart. Hiruzen finished his pipe, tapping out the ashes before placing it back into his robes. "Well, I won't keep you any longer. Enjoy your evening, Ren." With that, he flickered away, leaving Ren alone once more on the Hokage monument. Chapter 32, Pick up a pencil to become a genin. When the final exams concluded and the results were announced, significant changes were made to the academy's student rankings. Uekata had left the academy as Juichi said. The bottom 5 students in the elite class were demoted to regular classes, though they still advanced to the second year. On the other hand, several high-performing students were given the opportunity to skip grades entirely. Among them, Ren, Eiji, and Hitoshi stood out the most. All 3 were directly promoted to the 6th year. Several others were allowed to skip to the 5th year, but Ren and his friends had made the biggest leap. On his first day in the 6th year classroom, Ren immediately noticed something amusing. He was the shortest student in the entire class. Eiji, being a giant, towered over most, and even Hitoshi blended in well with their new classmates. Ren, however, looked noticeably younger, but before anyone could comment on it, they quickly learned the hard way that he was also the strongest in the class. During their first sparring session, Ren effortlessly dominated his opponent, proving to everyone that his small stature was nothing to mock. Sparring sessions in the 6th year were held 3 times a week, and in addition to taijutsu and weapon training, they also had ninjutsu classes. Unfortunately, these only covered the Academy 3 jutsu, nothing Ren hadn't already mastered long ago. Among his new classmates, only one person caught his attention: Yujao Yuzuki. She was well known for her exceptional swordsmanship and was rarely seen without her weapon, though she wasn't permitted to use it in class. Yujao already had a strong reputation within the academy, having been the top student in the 2nd year, the previous year before being promoted directly to the 6th year. Aside from adjusting to his new environment, Ren's second year passed without any major incidents. Unlike before, there weren't any significant events that could trigger system rewards. The last time he had received a reward was from his first meeting with Hiruzen, a moment that still amazed him. That single encounter had granted him 3 mastery points, each capable of increasing his mastery by 10%, before reaching the advanced level. He had already used one on chakra control and another on shadow clone mastery, allowing both to break into the advanced level within a few months. For now, Ren decided to save the remaining mastery points for future use, knowing that his path ahead would only grow more challenging. This year, the academy held a similar exam to the one they had in the first year, but this time, the fights were noticeably different. The students were no longer wildly throwing punches like untrained brawlers. Instead, they fought with more strategy and precision, showcasing the techniques they had developed over time. Ren's opponent in the match was Yuja Yuzuki. He had to admit she had skills. Not enough to force him to go all out, but enough to make him acknowledge her talent. She was precise, disciplined, and had an instinct for combat that most students lacked, and her kenjutsu was enough to overwhelm normal Gainens. Though Ren ultimately won the fight,